Hello, and welcome. I am Chilling Tales. And as you get ready for bed, you must know that you are doing amazing and you deserve all the sleep you can get. So as you are winding down, let me know where you are from and what time you are watching this video. Like and subscribe to help the channel if you'd like. Now put your mind at ease and let the story unfold. The sign above the door still said WRX 1310 AM, but the bulbs behind the letters were half dead, so most nights it read something closer to WRX. The X felt appropriate. It sounded like a kiss and a warning, and the shape a map uses when it wants you to turn around. I took the night shift for the same reason people take night shifts in places like this, because no one else wanted it, and because the money wasn't good enough to be anyone's first choice. The station sits where the city gets thin and the river fattens up. Old warehouses with their windows bricked in, a handful of tire shops, a diner with a neon coffee cup whose steam pulses in slow red breaths. When the sun is up, the whole block smells like hot rubber and old oil. When the sun's down, it smells like a motel room that forgot who stayed there last. Board op, voice, light maintenance, the station manager told me. Her office had 2 desks, one for payroll and one for the cat. The cat chose mine. Midnight to 6, keep the logs clean. The tower hums in a big storm. Don't panic. We've got a generator, but the switch is sticky. Kick it. Any callers? I asked because I was not a child and knew what dead stations feel like in the bones. You'll get some, she said, old people who forget to sleep. Third shift nurses, the man who makes breakfast for snowplow crews when it snows. They'll keep you company. And requests? She smirked like a lint roller. Darling, you don't have the licenses for much of that anymore. But sure, if they ask for Patsy Cline, slide on a cover so the big boys don't bite. Talk a lot, it's cheap. Rocks used to be a local legend. Before my time, and my father's barely, a baritone with a tasteful mustache kept half the valley alive through layoffs and ice storms. The station's photo wall still held his framed headshot. Part newsman, part Friday night dad. Then the company in another state bought the licenses and split the day in leases, syndicated chatter, daytime sports, religious hour with a preacher whose voice sounded like a shoe polishing itself. Night was junk shop time. Night was me. The booth was small, God's own aquarium, if God had bad tastes. Brown carpet, foam squares on the wall gone the color of tea. A console older than my first crush, the board patched with tape where mic 1 used to be and where phones sometimes pretended. A window looked into the bullpen that no shows used anymore. Beyond that, a hallway with framed black and white photos from the station's good years, and a door that stuck in humidity. A sign over the hallway switch, "Do not turn off the red light under any circumstances." The red light hung over the outside door like a drunk moon and burned whenever we broadcast. It meant on air to anyone who knew. It meant something else to me by the second week. I started the way you start in a haunted house, by pretending you're the one doing the haunting. "Good midnight, Valley," I said, my voice lower than it is in my human life. "You're up late with rocks, caffeinate me if you can. Keep me awake if you can't. Nurses, write me. Drivers, honk in a beautiful key when you pass a red light swinging over a tired door." People called. Her name was Dee Dee. She worked laundry at Mercy and wanted something with a backbeat to keep her legs moving. A man I assumed was divorced because of how carefully he didn't mention anyone. Asked for an old love song and then said, "Never mind, I shouldn't." A woman who wouldn't give a name just breathed for a minute and said, "Finally, he's asleep. Can you just talk to me until I'm sure?" I talked. The night talked back. The tower hummed. The first time the phone rang without ringing, I figured the line was dirty. You know the sound old wires make when they realize there is no longer enough world on the other side to carry them properly? That quick, soft chirp like a bird practiced into silence? It did that. The light didn't blink, but the line was there. I punched it because silence is harder to sell than even a bad voice, and said good midnight. Warox? A woman breathed. She had the careful cadence of a person who practiced being calm when she didn't want to be. It sounded like she was in a closet without room to kneel. Is it you tonight? She asked. Depends, I said, my hand hovering over the pot fader, because I am not a fool. Who am I supposed to be? The one in the glass, she said. You're new. Newish, I said, and in the window my face looked like someone I hadn't met yet. I like the way you keep the levels even, she said. The last one let the songs hurt. They hurt anyway, you know. You don't have to help. I told her my name, and she took it and rolled it around like a lozenge. I need you to stay on, she said. Urgent now. All the way to 6. Don't play whatever he asks you to. He'll call. He always calls when the red light is clean. The preacher? I asked, trying a joke to keep my lungs from weeping in public. No, she said softly. The other one. A click. The line didn't hang up. It ended, like a half-remembered dream, when the cat jumps on your chest. The red light over the back door flickered once. The tower's hum deepened a half-step, as if the weather had decided to harmonize. At 1:17 a.m., the real ring came, BRRNN, like a small bell inside a cereal box. I punched the line and hit the delay because I am a little bit trained. Good midnight, WRX. Static. Then a man's voice, new and old, the way a song sounds when someone presses a warble button. You're late. Actually on time, I said, glancing at the atomic clock the manager had taped to the wall, with the seriousness of a room where the minute hand used to matter. You're early, he laughed. I have heard lovely laughs in my life, and awful ones, and the ones that sound like someone trying on a laugh to see if it fits. This one had a seam. It sounded like a thing once broken and recently set. Play me something, he said, something with an engine in it. Specific. I scrolled through the library. The legal stuff was thin. The gray stuff was deep. Recordings of local bands that signed away rights for a joke. Tracks from a basement cover act who gave us 3 CDs of Springsteen-ish that wasn't. Backups we didn't deserve to have. My hand hovered over a track titled 3-Lane Mercy and then dragged itself to a stack of PSAs instead. The man hummed behind the static. The red light brightened. I can talk to you, I said brightly. I can keep you awake. I don't sleep, he said without brag. I prefer to drive. We love a driver. I flicked all the faders to make noises come and go, because a board in motion is almost music. What kind of road? Empty, wet, no signs. Ha, I said nervously. Our valley. The DOT is going to call me if you keep slandering them. He chuckled again. The chuckle had teeth. A song, he said, bored now. You'll learn I don't call twice. Am I learning? I asked to cut the fear in two. What is this, training? Apprenticeship, he agreed, but you don't like that word. A click, not a hang-up. The feeling a night gets when someone leaves the building without opening a door. When I stood at the glass and looked past my face, the bullpen was empty as it had been all night. A chair had shifted slightly, as if someone had gotten up in a hurry to make a point. I put on a weather bed and read the hour pronounced precipitation like it was a guest, added a joke about how no one needs a forecast if they have joints with opinions. Did the thing voices do, or they turn fear into filler? I told myself the delay meant I could stop anything before it slid into the room. I told myself the red light was a kind of spell, a circle the station had drawn for 50 years to convince the dark that it should listen and not eat. At 1:23, the phone chirped without the light again. I hit it. Warox. Don't, the woman said. He makes you talk, and then he makes you play it back to him later, and takes the part he needs. What part? I asked. The part that thinks nothing bad can happen if you keep talking, she said. I have to go. I'm in the broom closet and Mrs. Owens just came in for more toilet paper. Click. Who are you? I asked an empty line. The red light hummed. The tower responded, like a bridge under too many feet. By 2 a.m., my voice had learned how to put itself in a lower place and stay there. The script in front of me turned to scribbles, the scribbles to words no one wrote. I read copy for a farm implement dealer who had moved his lot 5 years ago and had a name like a man who used to give kids cigars. I read a PSA about a county fair that had burned down before I was born. I read the top of the hour legal ID in a cadence I'd never practiced. This is WRX 1310 AM, bringing you the night the way you ask for it. It felt like reading an oath. At 2:36, the on-air red light outside blinked. One blink. All our gear is old, the manager had said. It drinks power like a teenager, but that blink had timing. It happened exactly when I turned down the bed and left space for a breath. Outside, down the hallway, the door latch sighed, then decided against it. You learn a building's noises fast. Which ones are the compressor, the ice machine trying its best, the raccoon overhead deciding whether to move in? Which ones are the ones that come from inside your head? Hunger noises, exhaustion scraping. The sigh at the latch was neither. It was the sound a door makes when a polite person pretends to knock just by leaning close. The tower hummed the way a person hums to make you forget they have a mouth. I put a CD in and hit play on a jazz thing we did have the paper for because dead men's catalogs are bigger. 2:03, I said, stupidly to the air. If you're crossing the viaduct, watch the black ice near the fourth seam. Yes, the fourth, and don't pretend you don't know what I mean. The chirp. No light. Once, the woman said. Just once, I answered. When he asked my name, he said it back to me like he was making sure it fit. He called me by that name for 50 minutes until the red light went out with the dawn, and then he didn't know me anymore. Please don't say your name again. I have to, I said automatically. It's the law. Not to him, she said, and suddenly she was on 2 lines at once, her voice in the phone and her breath in the window glass. The booth filled with a smell like cold rain on turned dirt. If you feel the need to explain yourself, you are already doing what he wants. Click. I filled between songs like a fireman's arm. The board seemed to know my hand. The little start buttons glowed warm as if my fingers were their plan. My throat went dry, and I drank coffee that had been made in the last administration. My pulse learned the routes of each ad break as if the console had laid them in as paths for animals. At 3, I swore I heard the baritone from the old station headshot chuckle from the hallway, a friendly sound with one extra tooth in it. PSA from the library, I said, queuing up a recording from whatever era WROX had money for a library. Story hour Saturdays 11 to noon, no unattended children, a reasonable request. The child in the recording laughed on cue, too high, the laugh elongated like tape left on a radiator. The red light outside burned brighter. Call in and tell me about the best, worst road you ever drove, I said, panicking toward Small, because people call up the perfect roads, and those are never true. The chirp again. What's your best, worst road? I asked, ready to hang up if laughter came with seams. County 12, a male voice said flat, before they fixed the shoulder. Ah, I said, because that road eats cars when it has nothing better to do. The place where the crossbuck leans because there's absolutely a train and absolutely no track. Right, he said, and then the voice changed. He said my name, the way a parent does when they're about to ask you to get in the car, because the hospital is where you need to be. Play me something with drums. No, I said, before the part of my brain that does social grease could step in. We've got no license for anything except a sad version of Take 5. Play me the Not Quite, he said, and the radio's delay light flared and died as if the thing in between me and the air decided it could get there quicker, another way. I put on the PSA again. Remember, I said, my mouth speaking while the rest of me went still. We don't exist without you. If you're drunk, don't drive. If you're lonely, call me. If you're tired, pull over at the diner with the neon cup and tell them W.R. Oaks sent you. They'll give you a refill. Tell them I sent you. The man on the line said in my head, not in my ears, and the red light outside fluttered like breath on glass. I am not brave. I am not a hero in the way stories like to sell hero. I did not recite scripture or salt the threshold. I did what night shift people do. I chose the next small thing I could do and did it stubbornly until it looked like courage. I slid a CD into the disc tray and played 2 minutes of Rain because the station had a local artist who had recorded City at Night with a hand mic and a roof. Then I brought my own mic up and told a story about a night the automatic car wash downtown ate my mother's bumper and the manager apologized with a voucher booklet so fat we washed a car we didn't even own yet. The console's lights looked like a quiet Christmas. The tower hummed to itself, and the hum felt like a dog deciding to lie back down after it has already stood up. At 3:45, the door opened, not the back door, the hallway door, the one I had deadbolted and chain-locked out of habit. I heard the chain go tight and stay that way. The door moved about half an inch into the room and held there, polite, while the chain chose its side in a conversation I wasn't invited to. The red light flickered and didn't fail. I tasted pennies. I didn't turn to look. I learned that from an old man in a different city who used to sit up with dying people and said turning toward certain doors makes them wider. I told a different story, this one about a gas station night clerk who used to let me count his packs of Marlboros when I was 9, and he wasn't supposed to let kids in the booth, and he did anyway, and taught me change, which is kindness, no matter what the world says it is. The door eased back and closed. The chain sighed as if it had been complimented on its figure. It's harder when they're polite, I said into a microphone no one had asked a question into. At 4, the woman called again. It was the real ring this time. You're doing well, she said. He's bored. He's in a car with the windows cracked and the heater making sounds. He wants to drive through the city and listen to the station bleed into another. He wants to catch you as you ghost out. Her breath warmed the glass. Frost formed where she said my name without saying it. Don't say you'll keep him company. I won't, I said. I'll keep other people company, and he can listen to that. Better, she said. Tell them something they can hold on to when the red light goes out. So you're real, I said, because no one should trust untested angels. Not exactly, she said. I'm one of the things that happens when people need to talk into the dark, and the dark needs someone to talk through. We organize ourselves after a while. We hold our own hands. Are you dead? I asked, which is a rude question, and the only one I had strength to carry. I am on the side of the glass that doesn't fog, she said, which is not the same. Why do you care? I asked. Why me? Because your voice is tidy, she said. Tidy, I repeated, offended. It has corners, she said. Things with corners can keep the rain off people. Sometimes you keep the rain off things that do not deserve it. Her tone cooled. You will never play him what he asks for, even when he makes you want to. Promise. I promise, I said, and the room breathed the small sigh of a contract signed. By 5, it felt like the booth and I had become one instrument. The board sliders were a spine. I scratched a note, and the station changed shape. I lied, and the ceiling dipped. I told the truth, and something in the tower straightened. I told listeners about the diner's pot of coffee and about a deer in the median near mile marker 124 that had no interest in learning economics, and about a snowplow driver pulling in behind a school at 5 because a school should look like a promise even when the county's broke. Call me when you get to the light by the pharmacy, I told a nurse from Mercy. There's something about the 6th light on that pole that makes people cry. I'm not saying it will, I'm saying it might. So if it does, you'll know you can blame something that can't be hurt. At 5:30, the storm the station manager had promised rolled its shoulders over the river. The tower hummed in the exact note the red light liked. The generator clicked its tongue at me in the back hall, and I went and kicked it, and it breathed on the third kick. I could feel the man out there in the dark, drowsy with ask, getting nearer because boredom leads men to doors. He didn't knock this time. He waited for the station to ghost out at the top of the hour so he could slip between shows like a teethy eel. I did something the manager would have fired me for if we had this conversation in the morning. At 5:56, I turned off the automation. I killed the next show's stinger. I turned off the legal ID bed. I left the red light burning and the mic up. We don't have anything scheduled. I told the valley we've just got 4 minutes and a room and a sound. I could make a sound, the man said, without calling, without breathing, from a distance that felt too near. You won't, I told him, and then I spoke the only prayer I know that works. Inventory. I told the night what was in my pockets. Keys, too. Receipt for a coffee whose ink had decided not to be useful anymore. A coin from a foreign country I had never visited. A paperclip. Lint. A dried bean. I told the night what was on the board. One dead channel where mic 3 used to be. One half-alive phone. A CD with a play button that had never failed me. I told the night my full name. First, middle, last. Not into the phone or to the man, but to the people in their cars. To the nurse on the verge of the pole that weeps people. To the snowplow driver. To the old man walking his apartment, because every step is a decision and the floor is a map. I told them my name, so that later, if the man called and asked, I could say you missed it. I gave it to someone else. At 5:59:30, I said Wallach's 13:10 a.m. We are still here. At 6:1 the red light went out, not a blink, off. The hum of the tower changed to the low, uninteresting tone of proper business hours. I could feel the man's mouth make a shape of an annoyed smile. The chain on the door lifted itself slightly off the jamb, as if to say, we'll try again tonight. The coffee at the diner across the street pulsed once in its urn and then settled, like a body breathing in sleep. I didn't move. The cat stepped into the booth and rubbed against my shin as if she had come to collect something I had promised. I felt the shape of the night in my throat, how much I had fed it, and how much it had tried to take when I was distracted. The phone didn't ring. The delay light lay like a dead eye. The board looked like a cemetery before the gravedigger comes to mind. The flowers. At 6:07, the station manager opened the though-locked hallway door with a trick I had not known existed and said, "You look like someone who almost quit." "Almost," I said. "What's the red light for?" She didn't pretend not to know what I meant. "It's a promise," she said. "We keep it when we can." "Who was the last one?" I asked. "The last night voice." She sighed. "You'll see his picture on the wall with the mustache," she said gently. We found him asleep at the board with a song on loop and a ring mark from his coffee, and a smile like a person hearing applause in another room. "Dead?" I asked, as if dead were worse than what else I could imagine. "Rested?" she said. "Anyway, don't worry. The red light doesn't ask you for anything you don't already want to give," which is the only kind of lie that works. I went home and slept through the day, and woke to a voicemail from the nurse, who cried at the sixth light. She said, "You kept me company. The deer was there. I think you saved his life too," which is funny because I don't think deer have radio. The man didn't call. He doesn't need phones the way we do. He reads schedules. He listens for silence, the way men like me listen for footsteps in hallways. I took the night shift again and again and again, because it turns out I like talking to the valley when it pretends not to listen. It turns out I like being the circle a red light draws. It turns out I like learning the difference between a door being polite and a door being brave. The woman called sometimes not to say anything except keep the levels even. and wants to ask if you feel something standing behind you, and it is tall and careful, don't turn. Not yet. Give it a small story to hold, something with corners. I do. I tell the towers and the men in cars and the nurses and the tired and the dead and not of the valley, small stories with corners. I do not play him the songs he asks for. I play him rain sometimes because rain makes him quiet. I list what is in my pockets. I tell people my name at the top of the hour, where it belongs, so I won't be tempted to squander it later. I keep the red light burning until 6, even when storms kick it and the generator needs 3 kicks back. If you are driving at 1:17 a.m. and you hear a voice that makes you think of dark roads without signs, don't ask him to keep you company. Ask me. If you are in a closet behind a mop and a bucket, call from there. I will listen, and the red light will keep itself brave a little longer. If you have to pull over at the 6th light to cry for no reason, you can write down. Do it. I'll tell you the names of the things in my pockets until you are done. If you are tired, I will list the bridges and the roads that pretend to be straight and warn you about the deer who don't like economics. If a song with an engine keeps catching your ear, hum it, but don't let me hear you. He listens for that. He is always on the line that doesn't blink. When the dawn takes the red light, and I tell the valley the call sign and my full name, and say we are still here, know that I am saying it to the glass too. I am saying it to the door that breathes. I am saying it to the old mustache on the wall, and the cat, and the woman who lives on the breath side of the window, and to the tower that sings when it rains. We are still here, for now. Now, on to the next story. The first time the building screamed, it used the intercom. I was halfway through my midnight rounds at the Charlemagne, 12 floors of brick and stubbornness on the edge of the old financial district, when every speaker in the place clicked alive at once. Usually the intercom coughs and clears its throat before it learns what to say. That night it found a pitch it liked and held it. The sound wasn't words, it was the absence of them stretched thin until they cut. Tenants opened their doors on chains and looked at me like I had promised them, quiet and was now breaking contract. Somewhere a baby started crying, and the crying didn't stop when the sound did. It dwindled slowly like a coin spinning down on a counter, and left an echo in the lobby that made me feel like I was listening to a recording of my own breathing. It's the wiring, I told Mrs. Patel in 3B, who watched me peel back the metal faceplate like I had a better plan than to stare at it. Old building, old bones. Sometimes they complain. Bones don't sing, she said, and shut the door gently so it wouldn't seem like she was slamming it in my face. I didn't sleep that morning because the building had decided I shouldn't. I sat at the desk in the night office with the logbook open and my pen placed neatly on the line for 0358, district-wide power hiccup, and watched the monitor that shows the front door. It's an old system, the kind with a burned-in after image of the doormat, and a polite ghost of every person who's ever stood too long in the lobby. When sunlight finally came and colored the marble, the monitor flickered once, and the after image of a woman in an old-fashioned coat straightened and walked away as if she'd been waiting all night and was late for an appointment I couldn't keep. Everyone has an opinion about the Charlemagne's age. The finance people say 1923 because that's when the money arrived. The romantics say 1899 because the cornies mean something to them. The plumbers say 1978 because that's when the last sensible person touched the main. For the tenants, it has always been here. For the neighborhood, it is the building the bus shouts before it stops. For me, it was supposed to be a winter job that turned into 7 years of listening for the noises a structure makes when it wants to be a person and can't. There's a story that the Charlemagne used to be a hotel for brokers and their mistresses. There's another story that it was a sanatorium for men who looked fine until they didn't. There's a third story that it was a boarding house for singers who never got past Tuesday night. In the basement, behind the boiler, there's a room that used to be a laundry with a drain, so wide the city came and measured it twice. In the laundry's far wall, there's a door that never opens but always rattles when you pass, as if the air has lodged there. After the intercom scream, I paid attention to rattles. 3 nights later, the building sang again, but this time it picked an instrument, the elevator cables. It started as a hum you only feel in your fillings. Then it found a note and pushed until the note insisted on being heard. The car lurched between 6 and 7 and hung in the wrong place long enough to make a man in a suit lose his religion. I climbed into the shaft with a flashlight and a prayer I don't use for anything else. The cables twitched like an animal pinned for examination. When I put my hand on the steel housing, the sound came up my arm like -10 weather. In the dark, I heard something that wasn't me move at the top of the hoistway. A shift, a footfall. I shined the light up. Dust glittered in a column like the inside of a throat. "Hello?" I asked, because I am polite even to dumb ideas. The hum cut off so sharply I swallowed it. The elevator shuddered, remembered its job, and slid into place with the exact same misalignment it's had since '98. In the morning, Mr. Dunning from 7F died in his armchair. He had been 87 and industrious about pretending not to be. The paramedics were precise and respectful. He might as well have been a sheriff in a dead town from the way the young ones handled him. I stood in the hall with my hands behind my back, because my father taught me it makes grief think you're ready for it. The intercom speaker in the ceiling buzzed softly, the way bars used to buzz when neon hummed a little prayer. Mrs. Palin 3B watched from her door, hand on the chain, mouth a tight white line you only see on women who have outlasted 6 kinds of men. When they wheeled him out, the intercom clicked alive and said very clearly, "Mr. Dunning, arriving." It wasn't my voice. It wasn't human. It was the building's idea of a word, and it picked the wrong one. I called a vendor about the intercom. He said they could put me on a list. I asked about the elevator sheaves. He told me that if I didn't want to replace the whole system, I should learn to sing. I left 2 messages for the management company and got one polite return call that said, "We hear you," which is what a body says to a tumor when it's busy. That night, at 2, the building woke me again. Not the speakers, the pipes. There's a particular moan old copper makes when it cools. There's another the risers make when the top floors shower at once, and the water has to choose. This wasn't that. This was every elbow and union and sag in the whole system, inhaling at once. Then the building exhaled a sound so low, I had to put my ear to the radiator to know it wasn't my heart. Mia in 12E called the desk. She is the type of person who uses my name when she's asking for something and nothing when she's done. "The apartment is crying," she said without preamble. "Steam heat does that," I said, sitting up. The couch springs have learned my shape too well. It's old. It remembers things it shouldn't. "No," she said. "It said my mother's name. Names travel," I told her. "Through the pipes, through the shafts, someone on another floor. No one else knows it." She breathed, and the phone did a small, sympathetic click. The old one, the one we don't say, because we started a new life. "Do you want me to come up?" "No," she said quickly, and then softer. "Yes, I took the stairs, because elevators make me feel watched now. The hallway on 12 holds sound like a chapel." Mia's door was open, chain off, which meant she wasn't thinking about safety anymore. She stood in the center of her living room, arms crossed tight, as if her ribs had promised to hold her together. The radiator in the corner was hot enough to be a sin. It hissed with effort, like an old man dressed too warm on a spring day. In the hiss, a breath, and then Anya, Mia covered her mouth. I went over and laid my palm on the iron. There was a rhythm to it, A slight lift at the end, like a question. The pipes have tone. Sure, the whole building plays itself if you're inside it long enough. But this was formed. This was a name stuffed into steam like a note in a bottle. In the silence afterward, the floor above us let go a slow creak, not the movement of wood, but the kind weight makes when it decides to settle for the night. I looked up and saw in the ceiling stain by the window a shape I had never noticed, a woman's hair, or a tide that had chosen a direction. Mia said, "How long will this go on?" And I told her a lie I thought she could spend. "It was cold tonight. It will stop. The building complains when the weather changes." "I changed," she said, without looking at me. I started keeping a list of the building's noises. Not the usual, those I keep anyway, because if you don't write down what happens the same way every day, it grows teeth. The list had a column for time, one for location, one for what the sound sounded like before I told myself it was pipes. Intercom scream, 0358, building wide. Cable hum, 0112, elevator hoistway. Radiator whisper, 02912E. Anya. I didn't add Mr. Dunning's death because you should not let buildings make your lists for you. The Charlemagne didn't care whether I wrote it down. It had its own list. 2 days after the pipes spoke Mia's old name, something woke me again. Noises learn you if you listen too hard, then they use themselves on you. The lobby camera showed the front door easing open without hands. Wind does that. There's a trick to old doors where the pressure and the hinge play a game, and the wideness of the hall invites. The door swung to, slow and ceremonial, then closed. The doormat shifted as if something had brushed it with a knee-length coat. A single gray hair blew across the tile and got stuck on the brass strip. On 7, the elevator sighed itself into place. On 6, a child cried once in his sleep. On 3, water moved behind a wall as if a person had leaned there to listen. On 9, the phone in the hall outside 9A, God knows why we still keep a hall phone on 9, rang once and kept the idea of ringing long after the sound died. At 4:14, the intercom popped twice and said perfectly clearly, "Don't answer the door." My hand was already on the knob to go check the lobby. I let go of it the way you let go of a stove when you realize it's on. I stood in the night office and listened to empty air, willing it to have nothing else to say. Across the hall, the bulletin board with outages and please break down your boxes and notice of annual lint trap clean had a new sheet pinned under a push pin with a bent head, a rectangle of paper cut from lined notebook, the edges ragged in the way a person's teeth rag a piece when they are trying to rip and keep it straight. On it, in a hand I didn't recognize, she calls before. I took it down and held it under the desk lamp, like a cop in a movie I don't believe in. The ink had bled in 2 spots, tears or careless. In the bottom right corner, tiny and careful, 12E. I went upstairs. Mia's door was closed, chain on. I knocked once with the softness of someone who knows doors and their limits. She didn't answer. Through the wood, I heard the slow turn of someone's foot on the floorboards, and then the deliberate nothing people make when they decide to pretend they aren't home. The city has a notion of itself in the small hours. It's not the one the tourism board prints. It's the shape of light on a cracked tile. It's the sound of a bus kneeling for a person who changes their mind. It's the man in the vestibule across the street who always reads the sports page first, even if the headline is about a war. The Charlemagne learned that shape and started wearing it. The list grew. 013, stairwell B, 3rd floor landing, whispers between banister and wall, tell her, then noise from the pipe. 0158, intercom selective, 6F only, baby monitor static, no baby in building in 6. 0247, basement, laundry drain, echo of wind where no wind should be, rattle of the sealed door, 30 seconds later. 0322 7F, vacant, radio station from nowhere, the old big band hour cut mid-chorus. 0359 building wide, pressure drop, lungs of the building breath in, intercom coughs but does not speak. I asked the daytime super to listen to the recordings. Old concrete, he said. It holds the old station broadcasts. We did this in '04 when the Riverlight building started singing Patsy Cline into the water heater. Don't get poetic. I called my mother because mothers are the saints of dumb calls. Have you ever heard of a banshee? I asked, not because I believe in the old country we never lived in, but because naming is a tool, except not one that wails outside a cottage door, one that uses what's available. Every building, my mother said, pragmatically, has a widow. That's the person who knows where the sound comes from. Find her and bring her a chair. What if the widow isn't a person? I asked. She still needs a chair, my mother said, and hung up to make soup for people who refused to ask. I carried a chair to the basement and set it near the drain, far enough that it wouldn't get wet if the old steam traps spit, close enough that the rattling door could see it if seeing happened in the dark. I sat. I told the room the names of tools the way I say them to apprentices. Here is a strap wrench. Here is a length of pipe. Here is the hammer you do not call a hammer because words make habits and habits make slips. After a long time, the rattle softened, and someone I couldn't see took a breath that made the dust lift off the chair as if a hand had brushed it. Mrs. Dunning, I said, because the building had started using the names of our dead, and I wanted to offer back a name that made sense. You don't have to stay. The drain sighed and resumed being a circle cut in concrete. The third week, Mia left 12E. She didn't tell me. People don't. When they fear I'll talk them out of it or into it. The moving truck showed, and I stood by the door holding the pad to keep it from slamming, because the door slams when it thinks you're making a mistake. She came down last with a duffel and the notebook paper sign that said Esh-E calls before folded into a small, dense square. She didn't look at me. I didn't make her. The elevator insisted on stopping 2 inches low. She stepped over it without swearing, which told me how tired she was. 2 nights later, 12E phoned the desk. I answered, not thinking. The line carried wind from far away, the specific sound of a stairwell when no one is in it, a breath. My name, spoken like a person practicing what a mouth could do. Arriving, the intercom said behind me. Who is this? I asked, which is the wrong question when calling has already chosen you. The line clicked and left the idea of being open. In 12E, the hallway light flickered twice. Slow, a shadow passed across the door like a person deciding not to knock. At 0302, someone pounded on 10A hard enough to clock the jam. I got there sweating and half-booted, keys in my hand as if they were more than shaped metal. Mr. Tone cracked the door and looked at me like it had done him a private wrong. Who? I asked. A woman with hair all the way down, he said, pantomiming with a hand to his scalp. She did not ask to be let in. She told me to open. What did she tell you? She told me, he said carefully, that she had come to tell me a thing I already knew. He looked over his shoulder into the dark. I did not let her. On the monitor for the front door, long hair blurred across the glass. The doormat lifted and settled. The door swung, then settled again. The elevator hardware on the roof made one emphatic clank like a cymbal. The call sheet in my pocket had Mr. Tromun's name, circled from the afternoon, when he told me he had an appointment Tuesday. Oncology, joking voice, eyes like someone reading a recipe, and not for cookies. I wrote in the log, because writing is a way to stay polite when you're talking to death. 0302, knock 10A, did not open. That morning, Mr. Who's sister rang the bell and walked in like a person who belongs. She had on new shoes, and the kind of coat people keep for a wedding or a final appointment. She took the elevator without asking and came down an hour later with a small bag and a face arranged carefully into an expression she wouldn't have liked to be caught with in public. She nodded at me the way you nod at the hungry, grateful, apologizing, and left. The Charlemagne kept its throat clear for 2 days. I took the opportunity to do normal work, changed 2 boiler gaskets, one without swearing, freed a stuck sash in 8C, wrote a note to the management company suggesting winter paint would be useful in spring, swept salt from the lobby so the marble wouldn't forget itself. I almost believed in ordinary. On the third night, the building started using the phone. No one was at the desk with me at 2 a.m. because no one is, and the list of the building's noises had grown quiet enough that my hand started to look like my father's again instead of something I had borrowed. The phone on the wall rang once. It's the line people use when they want me right now. I picked up my pen first because old habits say that when a thing rings, you'll need to write down the name of a man who wants something you can't give. I answered. The room grew one size smaller. She calls before, the building said, into my ear in Mia's careful voice. Before what? I asked. Before, the building said, as if that explained anything a human could punctuate. The call ended. The line stayed open. The dial tone hummed under my skin, persuasive as a warm bath. I hung up. The phone rang again. Mrs. Patel stood in her doorway across the lobby and stared at me like a person who has decided that if you looked at a dog long enough, it would admit a trick. I smiled with half my mouth and lifted the receiver again, because I don't know how not to. A whisper, "Don't answer the door." The line clicked dead. When you have lived inside a building long enough that you know which handrail hums and which handrail sighs, you start not believing in coincidences. I took the stairs to 9 because 9 keeps secrets. The hall phone there, Polaroid yellow, its cord coiled in the exact amount of mess the day is willing to stand, rested on its shelf like a pet. Its receiver was just barely off the hook, as if someone had set it down so gently. The phone wasn't sure whether to tell anyone the line was open. I lifted it, expecting to hear nothing. A sound came back, not voice. Wind through teeth, a woman catching her breath after running the kind of distance that wasn't yards. The little click of a tongue wetting its lip, then a word, not in English, then perfectly clear, arriving. I said, "You have to stop that." The line laughed once in a way I wouldn't call unkind, and gave me a dial tone. Since the day my father died, I have believed in 2 kinds of warnings: the useful ones that tell you how to stand so your back will not break, and the useless ones that tell you a truck is coming too late for you to step aside. The Charlemagne offered both. The building said don't answer the door, and I listened, and Mrs. Korliova in 2D didn't, and the nurse who came with the oxygen tank did not have to ring twice. A week later, after 3 knockings that went unanswered and 2 pipes that whispered names I have not written because they are my own, I was down in the laundry checking the lint traps for the annual notice and thinking how no one ever reads it when the sealed door in the back wall rattled like someone on the other side had woken from a long sleep and wanted air. I set my palm against the cold paint. The rattle wasn't a hand. It was the way wind insists when it has something true to say, and the world has built something dumb where it needs to go. I pressed my ear to the seam and heard plumbing behave in a way no inspector would sign off on. Pipes set as a mouth, moving whispers along from floor to floor until they pooled here in this dumb end room where steam used to go to rest. In the whisper, my name, then another, a list like someone holding roll call at the end of a shift. "Do you want me to open it?" I asked the old paint. The building inhales when you make bad offers. It didn't. It waited. "I can't," I said, more to myself than to Brick. Even if I could, I'd be unwriting work other men did. They knew something I don't. The door rattled again, less angry, more irritated, like a woman who has told you politely twice and is now wasting both of your time. Then the building exhaled through the drain in a tone that lifted hairs. In it, a phrase my grandmother said when she didn't want us to go out on New Year's, not because of drunks, though there were those, not because of cars, because she calls before, and we are not always good at telling women no. After that, the calls became precise. The intercom wail moved from building wide to surgical. 2 tones and then arriving, then a floor, sometimes a number, sometimes a name. The building had decided to practice being bureaucratic about what it wanted. No one wanted to be the person I told about patterns in a night. I told them anyway. If you hear the speakers pop twice, I said, call me. Don't open, not until you see me. It's an old building, the management said. You can't frighten people with stories. It's a building that eats names, I said, and left the phone where it couldn't reach the rest of my mouth. The night I realized it had decided on me, I was unlocking the roof so the vent tech could get where he needed, when the intercom clicked twice, building wide, and said my name, not my job. Arriving, it added like a boarding announcement. I stood very still. Not yet, I said to the nearest grill. The grill breathed on me in response, the clean dust smell of air that's tried. I felt the building collect itself. I went down. I put a chair in front of the door of the night office and sat with my hands on my knees like a man in a small town, police station in 1954, who knows who's coming and why. I removed the intercom fuse and set it on the desk so the building would know I was serious. Then set the fuse back where it belonged, because promises are tools you don't use unless you can hold them all the way. At 03:59, the intercom did not speak. At 04:03, someone knocked on the glass of the front door, polite like a widow. I did not answer. The door swung open an inch and closed again, because hinges have habits too. The mat lifted, settled, lifted. On the monitor, the burn-in of every person who has stood too long in the lobby grew brighter for a second, like a long exposure photograph trying to collect itself. A woman in a coat that knew we used to have fur turned her head and faced the camera. Her mouth moved. I could not hear her. I lifted the receiver of the front desk phone. No dial tone. I set it down, and the phone rang. I picked up and heard the sound of the stairwell on 9. Then don't answer the door. I know, I said, to the building, to the stairwell, to my father, who taught me that if a man knocks at 3 in the morning, he is selling either Jesus or violence, and on the right street those are the same thing. I waited. At 04:14, the intercom in 12E crackled. The apartment Mia used to have, the one that still smelled faintly of rose soap when I'd fixed the sill last, and said in the careful voice the building had learned from her, she calls before. The pipes breathed in, out. The drain in the basement sighed. The elevator twitched and stayed where I had told it to. The knock on the front door came again, the polite kind, again, again. On the 4th knock, it lost patience, and the frame answered with a deep, low thud that made me think of trees that forget which direction is up. I stayed in the chair. The building stayed. At 04:25, the knock stopped. The doors to the mailboxes rattled in sequence like someone running their hand along a xylophone. A woman's hair crossed the lobby once, twice again, and then nothing. The phone breathed. The intercom slept. I waited until 05 to stand, because the shape of 4:30 belongs to the dead, and I didn't want to make a habit of violating their hour. When I did, the lobby smelled very faintly of rain, though nothing wet had come in from outside. The brass strip at the door had a single gray hair caught in it, and when I pinched it free, it crumbled like ash. At 6, the building did something I had never seen it do. It let morning in. The glass went the real color of dawn. Cigarette paper, then tea. The marble remembered how to act expensive. The monitor lost some of its ghosts, and showed only the doormat and the day. Mrs. Patel came down with a bag she refused help with, because refusing help has kept her alive a long time. She looked at me, and for the first time since intercom scream night, smiled with her whole face. "What did you do?" she asked. "Sat." I said, "Good." She said, "Men get up to make a mess. The Charlemagne has not stopped calling since. It doesn't call every night, and it doesn't always ask for anyone we know. Sometimes it says a name that belongs to a person no one remembers, until someone in 4C says she had that teacher in second grade who wore her hair high and said the names of birds in a way no man could stand. Sometimes it says a floor, and we all wait, and nothing happens, and you'd be a fool to think that's the good kind. Sometimes it whispers into the pipes in the stairwells and the hall phone on 9, and sometimes it offers no warning, and an apartment gets very quiet, and a person sits down, and the city grows one grief heavier and one voice louder when it asks for quiet. But it doesn't come in when we don't open. If you rent at the Charlemagne, I will tell you the rules the day you sign, because property managers print rules that matter to insurance, and I print rules that matter to staying. If the intercom pops twice, call me. If it says a name, don't repeat it. Names carry better when you lend them breath. If something knocks softly, look through the peephole, but don't look out the lens. Look at the frame. The frame will tell you if there's weight on the other side. If you hear a woman's hair move across the door, and it sounds exactly like your mother's when she shook rain out of it in the kitchen, make tea and wait for it to stop. If the elevator hums, take the stairs. If the hall phone rings on 9, let it. I will answer. I have the kind of ear the building prefers. I don't always like that, but I'm here. If you need to leave, leave quickly and take nothing that teaches the building your weight. If you have to stay, bring a chair. Sit somewhere the building can see you. Be patient. Fill a room with the names of tools and soups and street corners until the night remembers how ordinary it can be when it tries. If you must cry, cry at 5. 4:30 belongs to other business. We hung a small brass plate by the front door last week. The board approved it after arguing about fonts. It doesn't say Charlemagne or no bicycles in lobby, or even built 1923, like the finance men crave. It says, "Don't answer the door," and then, beneath, in smaller letters, a lawyer will pretend are a joke. She calls before. Most nights the plate is just a plate. Some nights, if you look at the lobby camera, when the intercom sleeps and the drains take their own kind of breath, you'll see the burn-in of a woman in a coat. Read the plate carefully, as if she's decided to be polite about it, and step back into the glass. Then the doormat will lift and settle, and the marble will warm under the idea of morning, and we'll begin again with laundry and packages, and boilers, and a hand-run vacuum, because machines wake ghosts, and someone somewhere in the neighborhood will tell a story about a banshee with an old voice. They're wrong about the voice, but they're not wrong about the telling. Now, on to the next story. They warned me not to take Harlow's Bend after midnight. Every town has a road like it, the shortcut you only admit you use in daylight, the strip of cracked asphalt that feels too narrow for 2 cars, even though it's striped for them, the kind of place headlights never quite reach far enough. Harlow's Bend was ours. It cut through a stand of oak that had learned to lean, past a ravine that swallowed tires when the shoulder gave, across a creek that had a way of flooding only in the dark. You could make it from my sister's place on the North Ridge to my apartment on Oak and Riverside in 15 minutes on the highway, or in 9 if you shaved the curve, skipped the town lamps, and trusted your brakes. I trusted my brakes. I had trusted them for years. It was the rest of the car, me, that had started to feel suspect. I left my sister's later than I meant to. We'd been in the attic again, sorting through what our mother left, a veil sealed in a zip bag that had gone the color of tea, photo albums with paper corners losing their glue, a music box that had never once wound without squealing like it was objecting to being asked to remember. We found our father's army jacket and a letter he never sent. We found the half-finished baby sweater our mother had started for a child that didn't make it to winter. We found at the bottom of a tub of Christmas lights 3 Polaroids of Harlow's Bend in daylight from before the county stopped mowing the ditches. Ribbons of road, nothing to be afraid of. By the time we'd put it all back in different boxes and had exactly the same argument about exactly the same things, keep, trash, no, that's not trash. Rain had started, big lazy drops that hit the porch light like moths. My sister offered the couch. I said no. I thought I needed to drive, and if I had stayed, I would have taken the couch long enough to dream the kind of dream that makes you square your shoulders for 3 days. The highway was closed after the river bridge. A crane stood where lanes should be, blinking red like a scolding. The detour sign pointed toward town, long and patient. Harlow's Bend cut 30 minutes off the drive. The sign didn't say not to. The rain wasn't bad yet. I told myself the stories were for kids. I told myself I lacked that caliber of superstition. So I turned down the bend. The first mile is always fine. It's a 2-lane with a line that's more suggestion than law, and the trees don't lean yet. They stand there like they're making themselves available for the idea of a forest. The first culvert rattled my tires the way it always did. I passed the rusty mailbox with no name, where teenagers leave notes for each other in summer. The gap in the fence where the deer pretend they need an invitation. My wipers squealed their small, infuriated squeal. At the second mile, the trees close in. Even in daylight, there's a hush there, the air gone mossy and heavier. At night, the oaks knit their branches like women in pews, and the road loses the word shoulder. My headlights always feel weaker here, like they're working through grief. This time they felt like they were working through my grief. I leaned forward, chin over the wheel, and tried not to make bargains with my own eyes. The sign came up too fast, and also right on time. Slow curve ahead. It's a rectangle pitted with rust and old BB shots, the kind of sign the county replaces every other year, and this road eats as practice. It was swaying on its post, just slightly, though the night had gone windless. The rain hit it, ping, ping, and the swaying didn't change. Okay, I said out loud. Saying okay to nobody is a way of telling yourself you're the one who gets to answer. I eased my foot. The car did that float thing it does when you find the edge between control and the road, doing you a favor. The radio crackled to life. I hadn't turned it on. Static bleached the air, then cleared like someone lifting a bowl off a candle. Under it, a voice, not a station, not a song, a voice in the register of a person trying not to panic. Don't stop, it whispered, shredded, no matter what you see. I thumbed the dial out of reflex. The needle didn't move, or it moved and the sound didn't change. The voice shivered up through the speakers, as if it was using my wire. Keep driving, it said. Not louder, exactly. Closer. I pressed the power button. The radio went dead. The silence after had a texture. Fine, like dust. The curve is tighter than it looks. You can make it without touching the center line if you've had enough practice, and nothing unexpected is there to argue. My lights swung, slick across black. They slid over bark, over wet. They found the woman standing at the shoulder. She wore white. Maybe it had been white once. Now rain had glued it to her body. A slip, or a dress, or some nightgown that shouldn't have been anywhere but a house. Hair dark with water stuck to her cheeks. One hand lifted, thumb out, that old American prayer. I have driven past men with signs, and women with strollers, and boys who thought they could outrun cars. I know how not to stop, but she lifted her head and looked straight through the windshield into me. Her eyes were my mother's. I braked so hard the back of the car did a little prayer to physics. The tires hissed on the wet. We stopped. We stood in it. Me, the engine knocking like a nervous knee. Her head canted, rain dividing into small insistences on her jaw. "Mom?" I said, because reflex is bigger than adulthood. Her lips opened like she was learning how again. "Please," she said, caught between breath and word. "It's cold. Let me in. There's the part of your brain that remembers what 7 feels like. There's the part that has a stack of notices about this exact situation clipped and waiting in a drawer. It's not her," the adult told me, efficient. "It's the road. You don't know that," a smaller voice said, sullen, and I hated it for sounding like me. I thumbed the lock. She slipped in like rain slips under doors. You swear you closed. The smell of her was rain and something tinny I didn't want to identify. Her hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a nurse to take her back. Up close, she had my mother's face, and also not. The planes were right. The story underneath wasn't. "Thank you," she said, and smiled, and the smile was almost right. Then I glanced in the rear view. A man sat in the back seat. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't felt the shift of weight. He was just there, thin the way hungry can be elegant, a gray suit that didn't belong anywhere but a photograph, a grin that didn't have anything to do with a mouth. I jerked the wheel. The car swayed. "Who are you?" I asked the mirror. The woman didn't turn. She stared ahead through the fogging glass like a patient in a waiting room they keep too cold, the expression blank and effortful. The man leaned forward until his mouth was near my ear, and the cold of him went through the cotton of my shirt as if it had been waiting for that particular patch of skin. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said, almost politely. "Now it knows you." I floored the gas. The car fishtailed, caught itself, roared. The curve stretched, then collapsed. Trees became lines, and then noise. The woman didn't move. The man's laughter came from behind my face. The next sign came sooner than it should have. Same rust freckles, same tilt, slow curve ahead. I cursed and braked, and my car stopped in exactly the same place it had before, down to the way the hood dipped. She was there again. The woman, white gone transparent, thumb out, the wet shine of her face. I spun to the passenger seat. Empty. To the back. Empty. The radio hissed as if it had been breath the whole time. "Don't stop," the voice said, faint enough for honesty. "Don't stop again." I believed that. I believed it enough to hurt. I dropped the car into drive and went around wide. My light swept her face just enough for me to see she had stopped trying to look like my mother. She wore some other arrangement of bones now, something hungrier. Her mouth widened, as if to take a mouthful of my car, and then she did what all animals do when you don't give them what they flatter themselves to be owed. She smiled like she'd be patient. The road kept looping. I don't mean I kept getting lost. Lost is when choices become stories, and every story fights for your mouth. This was a loop. I could have set my watch by it if my watch had not stopped at the moment the radio found a voice. Rain blurred the windshield. The speedometer found speeds I don't usually offer it, and every time the sign slid out of the trees like a repeat. Every time the bend made the shape of itself, and the shoulder offered the woman like a test nobody passes the first time. I drove past her 5 times. 6. On the 7th, she wasn't on the shoulder. She was in the middle of the road, hands at her sides like a girl waiting for a photo. I didn't stop. I didn't stop because I am capable of obedience when it is the only weapon left. I leaned on the horn, and my car's poor voice made the hollow sound like it was protesting a tax. I swerved around her, wide enough to spray the ditch, and for a full second we were window to window, and she tilted her head as if to memorize the angle of mine. I drove. The loop does not forgive, but it learns. By the 10th pass, there were more of them. A boy I'd sat next to in sophomore English, hair still blonde and likely forever now wet. My father sober and unhandsome, which is how he tried to be near the end. My first kiss, which felt like a cruelty because it reminded me of poor judgment that had not required supernatural assistance to acquire. They stood in the rain or sat on the guardrail that hasn't guarded anything since the year they paved the road and forgot to pave sense into it. They raised thumbs. They kept their smiles gentle until you got just close enough to see how they were welded on. The radio was not a voice now. It had turned into voices. They overlapped the way people on party lines used to, a murmur of advice that would have been easier to ignore if any of it had been unkind. Keep going. This part ends. Don't give under the name. One voice came through clearer when I passed the sign. My mother's voice, not the imitation. It said, "Don't pick me up," which is something she never had to say in life, because I have never been able to let anything sit where it wanted without asking it if it needed water. At some point, the numbers on my dash gave up. The green went out of them and left them as absent as the moon, the needle on the fuel gauge headed toward my failure. I did the math you do when you are stuck in a story, and the only way out is to live long enough for it to end. The math did not like me. On the 14th loop, the man in the back seat was there again. No door, no shift, just the particular cold his mouth makes when it wants your ear. "We can do this all night," he said, conversational, like truckers at a counter at 2 a.m. "I can't," I said, and my voice almost broke on the T. He clucked his tongue. "You can't imagine what you can do when you're invited properly." I pressed my finger into the soft place of my palm until the pain brought prayer back into the range of things I remembered how to do. On the 15th loop, something changed enough to frighten me beyond anger. The curve tightened, not by much, by the thickness of a promise. The oaks leaned another angle in, made a roof of the road, shrugged off the sky. My headlights hit a wall of rain, so heavy it looked like a curtain. The sign swayed as if someone had bumped it walking by. When the car broke through that sheet, the air tasted wrong. Less fresh, sharp, like damp copper. "We're in deeper," the man in the back seat said, pleased. "Good. Sometimes it takes a while for you to learn to listen." "I'm listening to the radio," I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. It told me not to stop. "Oh," he said, "that's me too." And he laughed. The laugh wasn't cruel. It wasn't anything. It was patience pretending to be sociable until patience could eat. On the 19th loop, the figure on the shoulder was a girl in a jacket too big for her, jeans rolled to keep from dragging. The eyes were not anyone I knew. The mouth was. It was mine, at 13, when I discovered what a mirror could do to you if you held its gaze too long without a purpose. She lifted her thumb like hitching was a skill she'd been looking forward to mastering. I rolled past her. The radio whispered, "Good." My hands were cramping from the way I was holding the wheel. My right calf had started to send up fireworks every time I asked it for gas. I wondered if I could make the loop on cruise control and if letting the car pretend to be me would count as surrender. I did not try to find out. On the 23rd loop, there was a light. It wasn't the sign. It wasn't a car. There hadn't been any cars since the crane. It was the yellow square of a window, way off through the trees, up the hill past the bend. It looked like a gas station looks in the middle of nowhere when you have learned how to believe in good luck again. The voice on the radio went quiet. That was how I knew this light was dangerous. I gritted my teeth and drove past the curve and the shoulder with no one on it, and the place where the oaks made a tunnel and the sign that had been waiting. The yellow stayed with me. Then it was ahead again, closer. The road is a thing that thinks it is a straight line until you ask it to be. I reached a cross street that I've never seen in daylight. Four-way stop, wet paint bright, a sign with 3 places I didn't know. On the far corner, a service station that hadn't been built in this county any time I'd been alive. Glass on 3 sides, old pumps with belly dials, a Coke machine that was trying to remember its youth. The bell on the drive clicked when my tires went over it. Inside, a man stood up from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a rag, and smiled right at me. The door to the station swung open before I had time to decide whether my car would turn itself off if I removed the key. The man waved like we'd known each other. He wore coveralls with Harlow stitched over the breast. His hair had the shine of men who know where grease lives. The light behind him made a rectangle of his shoulders and cut a square out of the rain. "Lucky night," he said. His voice came through glass. It felt like it came up through the floor of my car. "You're near out, aren't you?" I checked the gauge. If it had any truth left, it said I was a quarter from being interesting. He laughed. "You're past empty. We can top you off. Come on in and sign." I turned the radio back on with a finger I couldn't feel. Static. Then a voice I recognized because it had told me to eat when I didn't want to sit when sitting was the worst. "Don't go inside," my mother said, very tired and very exact. The rain slackened in that way. Rain does when it wants you to feel sorry for it. Harlow, if that's what he was wearing, and that's what he wanted to be, leaned his hip against the door jamb and scratched a cheek that didn't itch. "Your mother," he said, friendly, "always thought she could keep you from making friends." I should have driven. I should have backed out with my hands steady. Instead, I reached for the handle on instinct, the human thing where another human is framed in bright, and you think, "Yes, door." The minute my fingers closed, the man's smile widened. Not like a smile does, but like a drawer does, and for a full second, the light behind him went wrong. Too cold, too white, not light at all. But the idea of light, so bright, I saw the tiny bones in his hand raised in welcome. I drove. He didn't shout. He didn't chase. He stood there with his rag, and the bell on the drive clicked twice, and the yellow square died like a TV set, clicking off. After that, the loop was different. The oaks leaned away a hair, as if embarrassed. The sign had a fresh BB scar. The smell of wet copper faded to old rain. On the 26th pass, the woman in white stood on the shoulder with her thumb out and her mouth composed and her eyes not anyone's eyes anymore. I did not stop. The radio said nothing. I decided I didn't believe in voices. The gas needle went under the red line and then under whatever goes under red. The car complained like a child who has learned the word no and enjoys its mouthfeel. I said okay to nobody again. I loosened my hands. I waited to coast and knew that when I did, there would be no shoulder to save me. The car coughed, coughed. On the 29th loop, halfway between the sign and the center of the curve, the engine let go like a lover who had been kind for longer than anyone would expect. The rain had gentled to a lick. The wipers squealed and then went still because I switched them off to hear what absence sounds like. The road carried me. Momentum, then stubbornness. The car rolled almost politely, as if it had been reminded of manners it learned in a driveway and decided to show them to me. The woman stood in the middle of the road again. Her dress clung and defined. Her hair drew letters down her neck. She did not raise her thumb. She raised her hand, palm out, the sign you use to make someone stop from across a room without talking. And because my foot was already on the brake, it felt like obedience. I could have let the car do what it would do and aim for shoulder and stall and sit with her at the window while she learned my mother's mouth again. I put it in neutral and steered for the edge. The tires found gravel. Gravel found ditch. The car settled with a long, relieved exhale, as if it had been trying to spare my feelings by taking its time. She walked toward the driver's side slow, the way women in bad commercials walk toward convertibles. Her face was my mother's again. She had found the exact wrong smile. "Please," she said, and it was my mother's voice with the morphine gravel in it, and also the small humor a person uses when you are disappointing them. "Don't be cruel." "I'm not," I said, which was the first true thing I had said to the road. "I'm busy." She laughed with both sides of her mouth. Behind her, in my back seat through the fogged glass, something made the shape of sitting. The radio clicked on by itself, and made a sound like a phone connecting. A second voice. A man said, "We're almost done," as if we were both waiting for a bus. I cracked the window an inch. The air smelled like petrichor and old pennies, and the mint gum my mother chewed when she stopped smoking. "What happens if I get out?" I asked. The woman cocked her head. Rain streamed. "You walk," she said. "You walk back to where you were supposed to go, and when you turn around to see how far you've come, the road will be behind you as if it had never existed. Will you follow?" She looked amused. "I'm always in front." I closed the window. I turned the key. The engine offered me the small wheeze a pet gives when you try to coax it back past wanting. The radio whispered, "Foot now," and I put my foot on the gas as if the car could be tricked into remembering that wanting and doing are cousins. It coughed. It died again. I sat with my hands open on my knees. Rain dotted my jeans through the crack in the seal where the door had never fit right. In the rear view, the man leaned forward, closer now, as if about to tell me a recipe. "You know," he said, "there's a way to make this pleasant. You pretend your grief is a passenger, and you give it your lap, and you keep your hands on the wheel, and when it reaches for your throat, you call that intimacy. Is that what you want?" I asked. "Intimacy?" "That," he said, "or patience." He put his hands on the back of my seat and the springs in its side. My mother knocked on the glass. Not anger, not demand. The knock of a person who expects to be let in because you love her and also because she is cold. I looked at her hands. The nails were wrong. My mother bit her nails until they were careful, half moons of small shame. These were clean, oval, perfect, and that was what saved me. "I'm sorry," I said to the wrong hands, and the dress, and the rain, and the road, and the voice that had used the radio like a throat. "I can't help you." When I put my hand on the key again, the engine started. No coaxing, no cough, just the ordinary small miracle of pistons remembering their shoulders. I slid the car back onto the asphalt like I was leaving a dance with a partner who would tell stories about me later. The woman's face fell through 3 expressions too many to belong to one person. The man in the back laughed once, the laugh of a person who lost at cards and has decided to be excellent about it. And then the radio said in my mother's true voice, "Go." So I went. The loop didn't break. That would be too much like a moral. It thinned. The oaks made a little room. The sign swayed like someone had kicked it from a passing truck. The curve felt less confident about its own geometry. When the bend unspooled into straight, and the trees on either side returned to being trees instead of audience, the yellow light of town found me like it had been waiting for an apology. The car ran on fumes and relief into the empty grid of 2 a.m. My streetlights are sodium orange. They made the wet look warm. I parked under the tree that drops helicopter seeds in spring like a dad showing off for his kids. The engine ticked. Rain softened to memory. When I turned the key off, the radio clicked and then whispered, so soft I thought I might be inventing it. "Home." I sat there long enough for the windshield to fog over the places where my hands had been. When I lifted them, they left prints that looked exactly like prints. In the rear view, there was nothing but the back seat, and my jacket thrown on it, and the dent where I'd once dropped a toolbox and lied to my landlord about it. The woman's face, my mother's face, did not swim up. The man did not make himself comfortable. The road did not find a way into my cul-de-sac and rest his elbows on my hood and ask me to step outside. Inside, I hung my keys on the hook my sister insists we have so I won't lose them. I went to the bathroom and turned the light on and looked into the mirror because sometimes bravery is just that mundane. My face was my face. The glass behind it reflected the open door, the hallway with the thrift store runner, the frame of a photograph I had hung crooked a year ago and stopped seeing. I slept with my shoes by the door and a towel over the bedroom mirror. I woke 3 times to the sound of rain that wasn't there. Once I woke to the sound of the radio in the living room, trying to tune itself. I got up and found it unplugged and put the plug on top of it like a parent does to a remote. In the morning, the sun made a promise it doesn't have to keep. I called my sister and said I was coming back to help with the attic. She asked if I'd taken the bend. I told her I'd taken the long way. Neither of us used the words for those two things. I don't drive Harlow's Bend, not after midnight, not when the rain starts. When people say shortcut, I say no. When teenagers at the diner say they saw the woman in white, I ask them what shoes she wore, and if they say they didn't look, I pay for their coffee, and I say next time, look at hands. Hands never learn how to lie correctly. Sometimes late, when the wind comes down from the ridge and the night learns where it forgot to be quiet, my radio will click in the living room. Once it said softly, keep driving, like a goodbye that did not require my answer. Once it said my name in the voice I already carry inside me, which is my mother's, and I said nothing back, because some loves stay the size they are, only if you don't feed them the wrong thing. If you take Harlow's Bend after midnight, you might make it. People do. Most come back with a story that gets longer in the retelling, and a smile that tries too hard for your benefit. A few come back and stop smiling, as if they've used the muscles up and are saving them. A handful don't come back in the way that gets counted. If you go, keep the radio off, or on. If you're the kind of person who needs a voice to argue with, don't stop. The woman will be someone you know, or someone you wish you had. If you must look, look at hands. Don't follow yellow squares into lit rooms that don't belong to your day. If you stall, it will ask you to be polite. You may be everything else you are, but don't be that. When you get home, and you will, if you keep your hands and your yes to yourself, sit in the quiet and listen to your house breathe. Put a towel over the mirror if it makes you feel like you made a decision. Call the person who keeps your spare key and tell them you were going to call anyway. If the radio clicks and a voice uses your mother's grammar, remind the air that you already know how to drive. Sometimes the bend will try to be in front of you again. Sometimes it will be. When it is, there is no trick, only this. Keep moving. The loop likes patience. Don't loan it yours. And if the road says your name exactly right, don't give it the comfort of correcting its pronunciation. Keep both hands on the wheel. Remember the sign. Let the curve be a curve and not a commandment. Count to the far side. When you reach it, do not look in the rear view to check. The bend loves that. It loves to be believed. Let it wonder instead. Let it stand there in the rain with its bad mouth and patient friends, and the yellow square waiting for someone who doesn't know better, and let it tell itself stories about you in which you were kinder than you had to be and still didn't stop. That's how you win on Harlow's Bend, not by defeating anything, but by refusing to audition for the part it's been saving for you since the first sign swayed and no wind moved it. Now, on to the next story. I was the only one left on the platform when the station decided to remember me. Greystone is small as stations go, 2 tracks, a brick building with a slate roof that leaks in March, a clock that gains 3 minutes a week no matter what the handyman swears he did. After the last scheduled departure, 11:45 eastbound, the train people swear by and the rest of the town ignores. The platforms go to sleep like anything else. The vending machines hum. The pigeons find their beams. The clerk in the booth lowers the metal shutter with a finality that wants to be a kindness. I should have left when he did. My duffel was heavy with the life I couldn't afford, and I was tired in the way that feels like rust has decided it is you now. But I didn't have the money for a cab, and I didn't want to go back to the apartment whose walls had learned my fights. It was colder under the canopy than it should have been for October. The air had that metallic tang city nights get when rain has recently argued with stone. I kept my hands in my pockets so my fingers wouldn't remember what they were for. The station emptied by increments. A janitor pushed a yellow cart and did not meet my eye. A couple argued in low voices until their words frayed, and they went outside to finish doing that somewhere less acoustic. An old man slept with his head back and his mouth open until the guard shook him gently and pointed him toward the taxi rank. The clock read 12:03, then 12:11, then I stopped looking. The rails began to sing. You can feel trains before you see them if you give your attention to the right place. The metal takes the news first, and then the air. I felt the hum in my shoes, and then behind my ribs, the faintest pressure, like an elevator works on your organs. The light at the far end of the platform did not turn green. No announcement belled. No headlamp wrote a promise into the dark. A wind moved along the tracks. Not a gust, not weather, an exhale with a destination. It brought with it the smell of dry iron and something like water left too long in a flower vase. A shape detached itself from the night and became a train without the courtesy of headlights. It came in soft, as if it were trying not to wake anyone, as if stealth were kindness. The cars were old, not modern, sleek, but not the kind of venerable red you take your grandchildren to at the holiday festival either. Smooth-sided, windowed, forgettable, a stripe of paint along the middle that might have been blue or green in better light. It slowed at my portion of platform with the practiced efficiency of a habit. The doors sighed like tired lungs and parted. If you've never stepped into a room with the exact temperature of a morgue drawer, you don't know the kind of cold this was. Not winter cold, absence cold. What light there was came from nowhere, a grayness that should have had a source, and did not. The aisle ran down the center of the car, upholstered seats in pairs faced forward. The windows showed me my own uncertainty and a smear of my own breath. There were people sitting. That was the first relief. None of them moved. That was the second realization. I stood just inside the door with my duffel at my ankle and told myself I was going to step back out, wait on the platform for a train that had headlights like an honest machine. The doors snicked shut as if they were tired of hearing me lie to myself. The car jolted, the station slid away, the world beyond the windows forgot to exist. "Ticket," said a voice soft as paper. He sat near the door, the kind of man photographs in old books call a commuter, suit bagging a little at the knees, tie too narrow, hat in his lap with a sweatband gone dark. His eyes were open. They were not certain who they belonged to. His hand came up slow, palm out, a ritual more than a request. I dug for my wallet before it occurred to me that there would be no scanner here, no place to tap a phone or a card that is trying to be one. "I missed the last one," I said. The clerk said. The farther end of the car answered, "Leave him." A woman sat by the window 3 rows down. She had long black hair that looked like it had been brushed recently by hands that knew how, a dress that belonged to 3 styles ago and none, and the kind of posture you hold when sitting has become a job. "He's new," she added, as if that explained anything. The man with the hat sighed his breath out and folded his hand back into his lap. He did not blink. No one else did either, and that was the moment I placed the wrongness. The car was full of people who were not breathing like I was. The woman crooked 2 fingers. "Sit," she said, "before he comes." I have been told I obey too readily, when instruction feels like a rope thrown into water. I sat opposite her because her eyes did not look like tacks. Up close I could see that her dress had been mended neatly at the seam, under her arm. Her left knuckle had a white scar where a ring had once rubbed. The smell around her was citrus and old books, and a trace of something iron that had no right to be on anyone. "What is this?" I said. It came out small, a child trying not to wake someone. "This is the last train," she said. "It doesn't have a time printed. It has a tendency." Her mouth made that half smile a teacher makes when you get close to the answer and might need to own it yourself. I looked back at the door. It had forgotten how to open. The window showed only my face and a gray that could be fog or could be blank. They'll tell you you need a ticket, she said. If you have one, they take it. If you don't, they take what a ticket would be worth. What does that? The car shivered. Something tall moved at the far end without the insult of actually walking. You know the shape of authority, even when it is dressed in old cloth. Let's commit to that because something in me insisted wore a conductor's uniform, black enough to catch no light, with buttons that made small moons where brass decides not to die. The peaked cap was pulled low. The shadow where his face should have been felt like a place you could get lost in and never be offered a map. He went passenger by passenger, stopping with the courtesy of commerce. They held out their hands. He took something from each with a pinch, as if he were collecting coins you couldn't see. A young woman in a red coat sagged after he passed, and her red seemed older. An older man pressed his hand to his chest and then let it drop, as if the gesture didn't belong to him. The suit with the too narrow tie managed a small smile and then forgot he had. My chest tightened physically, as if the air had decided to become a hand. When the conductor reached our row and turned the blank where his face should be toward me, my name left my pockets. I felt it happen. The hook pulling, the slack, the loss. Not the syllables people say when they need you. The fact of the name, the way it anchors you to your bones. Ticket, said the absence. I don't. My voice was behind glass. He's new, the woman said. Her voice was low without pleading. He hasn't paid yet. The conductor's head turned toward her a fraction. There was a pressure shift, ears popping when you haven't climbed. The absence moved on, and the air remembered how to be shared. When I could, I looked at her. You know him. No one knows him, she said. He knows you. What does he take? She looked at my hands on the seat, at the whiteness of the knuckles I had not intended. Pieces, she said simply, small at first. What you think you can spare. The train didn't go past scenery, so much as through possibility. Stations approached, platforms like sketches, lamps that made rings of light where a floor might be if someone funded it, and slid by without stopping. The doors sighed open at none of them, and sighed closed again, as if to stretch. At one, a child ran along the platform with something limp under her arm. At the next, the platform was a corridor, and the corridor was a throat, and I stopped trying to make sense of them in sequence. Where does it go? I asked. Down, she said, and when I looked at her in the way you look at someone who has chosen a metaphor, she added, away. The stops make you think you have a choice. Choice is part of the harm. What do I do? She stared at me for a long beat, and I had the thought, sudden and indecent, that she was beautiful, not for the symmetry of her features, but for the steadiness of someone who had been waiting a long time for the right stranger. You jump, she said, when it slows, before the doors, before he wants to ask again. And you, she smiled in a way that suggested all decisions had been tried. I got on before they put numbers on the trains to tell you where you were going. I'm not new. Some days I still remember what my apartment smelled like when the radiator had a good day. That's not enough to get off. What's your name? It was Clara, she said, and there was an ache in the past tense, shaped like a violin string pulled too far across its bridge. I keep it because they didn't take it the first time. I gave them other things I thought I could spare. He came again. I felt him before I saw him, the way you feel a deep bass note through drywall. He didn't look at me because I had only been taught once, and fairness is a thing even this service seems to respect. He looked at Clara. She held out her hand, and he pinched something from her palm with a delicacy that would have been tender if you didn't know it as theft. What was that? I asked when he had gone. The smell of the radiator, she said, very matter of fact, and I believed her. We passed a stop that had no platform, only a field of chairs arranged like a lecture. The chairs were full. The people in them looked up as we slid by, and their eyes did not change, and one of them had my boss's face at 30, and I hated the accuracy of it. "How do you know when to jump?" I asked. "When you hate staying more than you fear falling," she said. "For you, that will come quick. You brought no blankets. You could come with me." She shook her head. "You don't start by being generous to me. You start by being selfish enough to live." The car shuddered. Ahead, a stop gathered shape, a platform with painted lines, a clock that could have been a twin to Greastone's if time had agreed to stay asleep, a rack of newspapers wrapped in string. The train slowed, not enough to be safe, enough to be wicked. Clara touched my wrist. Her hand was cool, not cold. "Now," she said. "The doors hissed to make you believe in them. I didn't use them. I shoved my duffel ahead and threw myself after it. The air hit back. My shoulder hit concrete and became the whole world for exactly one heartbeat. Then the rest of the pain argued loud enough to be listened to. I rolled away from the edge because the edge wants to see if you want to visit the underside of things." The platform was empty, no newspapers, no clock hands. Whatever the train had shown me to make the notion of landing less obscene evaporated as soon as it could stop behaving. I looked up. The train was gone, not receding, gone. The rails were two black snakes going their own ways. The electric hum of the station was wrong in the way a room feels when someone else has just left it. Stairs rose, concrete patched with gum and old moss. My hands shook so hard I could not trust them with my own pockets. When I stood, my knees tried to convince me they grasped prayer. I took the stairs. Greastone breathed again at the top, like a chest that has just decided there will be more of this. The clock said 12:07, which was a lie of one kind or another. The vending machines hummed their promise of sugar. The posters on the wall made perky suggestions about autumn weekend deals to towns I could never afford. There was a draft that had not been there earlier, a small ribbon of air that smelled like old citrus, and a radiator. My duffel had not made the jump as successfully as I had. It was no longer beside me. I reached to check my wallet and phone, and found absence where both used to live. Something in my chest went to one knee. I walked outside, and the town was the town. Street lamps wore their halos like saints who had stopped being for a moment. The bar at the corner had turned its chairs up on the tables and hosed a day down the drain. My apartment, if I went to it, would be 2 blocks east and 3 north, and there would be a note shoved under the knob because people who like order are very brave when it is late. I stood on the curb and stared down the street and listened to the night give advice and didn't take any of it. I did not see Clara again, not in the way that would have been clean. I saw her in other things, the way frost draws lace in a window and then forgets what it meant, the way the radiator hiccups at 3 in the morning like it is trying to laugh, the way my own name sometimes feels like a jacket I keep putting on backward until I spend a day getting it right. For a week, I did not sleep properly. The door to the bedroom remained open because the closed version felt like a train door learning my hinge. I covered the mirror with a towel and told myself I wasn't doing it for story reasons. Twice at 12:07 exactly, according to an untrustworthy clock, my radio clicked on by itself, and the volume knob turned one notch like a mouth practicing yes. The first time I unplugged it and put the plug on the windowsill where it could watch the rain. The second time I said quietly no to a room that smelled like old citrus and a radiator and the very faintest trace of iron. If this were a different sort of story, that would be that. I would have touched a door the world keeps for fools, and I would have learned. But people who have learned are extravagances. This town rarely funds. So I went back to the station because there are habits that look like hope when you squint. Not the next night, not an invitation. A week later, when the cold had sharpened from suggestion to policy, I bought a coffee from the machine that tastes like burned promises and sat on the bench under the clock, and I watched the 11:45 go and the last janitor leave and the guard check the corners with his flashlight beam that knows more than he'll tell. When the platform was mine again, in that way silence sometimes hands you responsibility. You didn't ask to hold. I stood, and I waited for rails to sing. They did. The wind gathered itself and chose the low way along the track. The train slid in without apology. I told myself I would stay on the platform. There is a lot of telling yourself that happens around things like this. When the doors opened, the breath of the car had the smell that memory does when it tries to sneak in, wearing new clothes. The man with the too narrow tie did not look at me when I stepped in. The woman in the red coat had her forehead against the glass, like she was listening for someone who would never bother to knock. I walked down the aisle, and every person I passed felt like a word I had once known how to spell and now could only guess at. Clara sat where she had sat. She turned her head as if she had been saving that motion. Her mouth made the shape of my name, but decided not to get me used to the sound of it. I thought you got off for good, she said. I got off once, I said. That isn't the same. You're not supposed to come back. Neither are you, I said without meaning to be unkind. She smiled in that way that suggests the rule has been broken, and the rule does not care. He'll come, she said, and he did. The conductor's presence bent the aisle. He did not turn toward me immediately, and I understood this to be an acknowledgement that the game only works when the person playing thinks they have consented. He paused at the young man with an earring who had a finger resting on the edge of his seat, as if he had been about to stand and had been told not to. He took something invisible from the boy's palm. The earring dulled. When he reached us, he held out a gloved hand. Ticket, he said. I had brought something. It was stupid. It was also all I had. From my jacket pocket, I took a photograph of my mother at 17. Hair caught in a late summer wind, cigarette held away from her face, like she had been born elegant and only had to remember it. I had stolen the picture from one of the boxes my sister and I had labeled Keep, because we knew better than to label anything else. I held the photograph up. He did not reach for it. He pressed 2 fingers to the air just above the image and pinched. It was not the picture he took. The paper remained against my skin. What left me was the smell of the day I had scanned it with my phone. My mother's laugh at the corner of my apartment that was always dusty, the taste of my coffee, the relief that a picture had stayed. I felt the empty place he left like the small ache where a tooth used to be. That's not a ticket, I said. His head tilted a fraction. The cap's shadow deepened. Everything is, he said, and went on. He can be refused, Clara said quietly, after the pressure lifted. That's the other harm. He can be refused only by refusing to pay a price you won't be able to live with if you do. What did you pay? I don't know anymore, she said. That was the first thing. The stops slid past, each an attempt at bribery in a new tone. A platform full of people holding out their hands with palms up as if they had the law on their side. A corridor of doors, each cracked just enough to show a sliver of light and a shadow passing. A field where a train could sit and wait for grass to learn patience. At one, a station that was exactly Greystone, except the clock read wrong, and the posters on the wall were the ones I had taken down 2 years ago, and the vending machine had a flavor of soda they stopped making when I was a child because it tasted like cough syrup and persistence. The train slowed so sweetly at that one, I could have stepped off without learning anything painful about gravity. I could get off here, I said. I could go upstairs and find a different version of my apartment, where we never had the fight and the letter never came, and the clerk at the booth doesn't know me, and it would keep long enough for me to believe in it. That's one of them, she said. I used to have a stop where the music from the bar on the corner was always the song I loved in May and never heard again. He found it for me. He finds them for you. That's how he gets you to pay twice. What happens if I stay? You become the kind of person who calls it a bargain. She stood then, suddenly, as if her body had moved before she felt like humoring it. The door at the far end of the car had opened on its own, and beyond it, I saw a short vestibule and then another car, and in that car I saw people standing, not sitting. The light was different there, warmer, almost honest, and the air changed as if something in me believed dawn had been invented again. "You should leave," she said. "I can't do it with you. It has to be your fear. And you. I make other people leave," she said, with a shrug, almost proud. "Everyone needs a job." We went to the vestibule. The train slowed as it slid past a station with a name I recognized and had never visited, a name from a childhood map where the letters meant far. The doors hissed. We didn't use them. We stepped between cars. The second carriage had a bar at one end. You could lean your elbows and pretend a drink had been poured for you if you wanted your mouth tricked. A man stood there with a napkin under his glass and said to no one, "Cheers," and the conductor appeared next to him like an option and pinched something you couldn't see from his fingers. I wanted to pretend the thing he took was the taste of the drink. The window in this car showed me a different outside. Not stations, not platforms. A city I knew and did not. Streets ghosted by light like web, windows lit and then unlit in no sequence I could claim, bridges drawing lines under lines. My heart did the small double beat it does when the plane dips, and the pilot speaks to prove the plane is paying attention. "Jump," Clara whispered. It wasn't advice, it was the only grammar we had left. I didn't. I walked to the bar as if the man pouring could offer me an argument. Behind the counter, a shelf of bottles held labels in fonts that had not existed yet. One label had my father's handwriting on it. I reached and my fingers met glass that was cooler than anything has the right to be. "Don't buy from him," Clara said, "even if the drink is yours." "Do you ever get to drink again?" I asked, and the laugh she made was exactly human. The conductor turned toward us, and the air thickened, and I chose fear because it was the only thing I owned that still behaved. When the train leaned into something like a curve, and the bodies in the car inclined together as if choreographed, I put my hand flat on the bar, and then on the edge of the doorway, and then into the dark between cars, and used that grip to trust that falling is a fact, not a suggestion. Clara didn't move. She stood where I had stood a week ago, posture like a job. "Go," she said. It had the sound of a word she practiced and liked for the shape it gave her mouth. The jump hurt less this time, because the first time had taught me what stupidity feels like in your shoulder. I hit the platform, rolled, swore, laughed once without wanting to, and lay with my spine against concrete, and watched the underside of the canopy above me, pretend it had never met rain. When I looked down the tracks, there was only track. At the top of the stairs, Greystone was itself enough to forgive me. The clock read 12:07 with the stubbornness of the obtuse. I walked outside, and the air had warmed the way it does when stories are not doing the breathing for you. I went home. I made the kind of coffee you make when you're trying not to wake yourself up. I took my radio and put it in a cupboard and closed the cupboard and put the kettle on top of the cupboard, because petty victories are real. Then I took the photograph of my mother into the kitchen light. The paper was the same. The face was the same. I could see the corner of her mouth where cigarette met the joke. When I held it to my nose, I smelled nothing. It broke me in a way a poem would approve of, and I did not let it. That week I looked for tickets, not the paper kind, the other kind, things I could be tricked into thinking I could spare. I found a shoebox of letters and put them back. I found the sweater my ex left and put it in a bag for the thrift store because leaving it in the drawer had become an altar. I found the eviction notice and folded it into a paper plane and threw it at the ceiling until it lodged in the fan, and then I stood on a chair and took it down and burned it in a pie tin. Fire is the only punchline I trust. Sometimes now, at night, the rails hum under the city like a thought you are trying not to have. I take long ways home. I look at station clocks and the minute hands give me back the correct time, which is a gift I didn't know you could negotiate for. When the wind takes the low way along the track, I do not wait for doors. I see Clara in other places, a woman on a bus with a scar where a ring once rubbed, a figure in a laundromat who folds with the care of someone whose hands remember something and refuse to forget it, a reflection in a shop window that makes a mouth against the glass and then doesn't bother to fog it. Once, on a Sunday morning that felt like mercy, I felt the exact temperature of her hand on my wrist as I stepped too close to the edge of a subway platform, and I stepped back and said thank you to no name. If you ask me what the last train wants, I will tell you this: it wants rent. For each time you say aloud that a place has let you down, it offers you a car that can carry you farther from the responsibility of being person-shaped in a world that will make you sit and wait and think you should be grateful. It takes small pieces first: the smell of a radiator, the taste of a drink, the name of a day. It will let you leave if you are willing to jump while it is still pretending to be gentle. Some nights I hear the ticket office shutter slide down in my dreams. Some nights a voice says ticket very softly from the cupboard where the radio lives, and I get up and put the kettle back on top of the door like I am a person who knows how to keep himself. On the worst nights, the conductor walks down the aisle of my ribcage and pinches something I can't name out of the palm of a heart that has already done its work. I wake with my hands open and count to a number that used to mean stairs in the house where I learned to be tall. If you find yourself on the platform after midnight and the rails begin to remember their purpose, listen to the advice that comes through a static you don't deserve. It won't always be mine. It won't always be kind. Jump before the doors open. Refuse to get good at paying. If you carry a photograph, put it in your shoe where no one can reach it without making you dance. And if you meet a woman with long black hair who sits as if sitting paid her rent, and she tells you her name was Clara in a tense that means once and maybe again, do what she says the first time. She has work to do. So do you. The world above the stairs is not much, but it's ours, and the radiators, when they are good, still make a sound that with practice you can keep. Now, on to the next story. The path to her hut does not appear until you are already walking on it. It is like that with some mistakes. You think you chose the road, but it chose you when you took your first hungry step. I went into the forest because my brother was dying, and the doctors had run out of ways to say no without using the word. I brought the things the old stories say to bring when you seek Baba Yaga: bread, salt, a ribbon, and a question with a price you are willing to pay. I wore boots that remembered other miles. I tied my hair back so the trees would have less to hold. The forest met me like a person who knows your family. It was not friendly. It was not cruel. It was interested. The birches stood like white ribs. The pines leaned into each other to whisper. A crow hopped from branch to branch above me saying nothing, which is how crows are kind. I walked until the path appeared beneath my feet like something burnt into the earth a long time ago. It wound toward a smell you can only call old. Smoke, iron, mushrooms, the crispness of winter that's waiting at the edge of summer. I knew I had arrived when the fence greeted me. It is polite to say the fence is made of bones. It is more accurate to say the fence is made of warnings. They glowed faintly as if they remembered the argument. Beyond the fence, the hut stood on its chicken legs, half asleep, one talon scratching idly at the earth. The door faced away from me because that is how doors are when you don't deserve them yet. I placed the bread on the ground and the salt on the bread. I tied the ribbon to the lowest rung of the gate and spoke the rhyme every child in our village knows, but only fools or desperate people try on a real hinge. Fence, turn your teeth to the forest and your back to me, I said. The fence sighed like an old woman rising from a chair and rotated with the resigned delicacy of machinery that knows it will outlast you. The gate opened. The hut's door angled an ear, listening. I took one step, then two, then stopped because stories say you must never go farther than the house wants you to. Baba Yaga, I called, voice steady the way you make it when your heart is trying to climb a ladder with no rungs. I have brought bread and salt. The door opened a crack. Heat washed out, along with the smell of something simmering that might have been soup and might have been a lesson. Bread and salt, said a voice that had taught generations to stand up straighter. And what else? A question, I said. The door opened wider. The hut bent down to make the step more manageable. Chicken legs can be considerate when well fed. Inside, the ceiling sloped low, as if to remind you to bow your head. Herbs hung in bunches like children holding hands. A stove breathed. In a chair carved from a log sat the old woman herself, small and huge, bony and plush, beautiful and terrible, the way winter looks from the right window. Speak it, she said, picking at her teeth with a finger bone that might once have belonged to a saint or a thief. My brother is dying, I said. He is young and kind, and his life has not had enough time to make its own mistakes yet. I want him to live. She nodded as if I had ordered a soup she liked to make. And the price? I had rehearsed brave things, my hair, my hands, my shadow, but when I opened my mouth, what came out was truer. Take my luck, I said. All of it. The old woman laughed, delighted. Luck is a petty coin, she said. It pays for nothing you actually want and buys you everything you don't. Keep your luck. Give me something you cannot measure. My voice? I asked, afraid then, because I am a person who speaks to earn rent. Words are a renewable resource, she said. Come now, don't insult me with thrift. What do you want? I asked, and the hut leaned in, and the fence settled, and the crow on the roof cocked his head to better hear the shape of my refusal. Your certainty, she said, all of it. The dull, heavy thing that lets you sleep. The ugly little engine that tells you tomorrow will mostly resemble today because it is polite to do so. I half laughed, half cried. That's not a thing, I said. It is, she said. It's the only thing worth anything. You will wake and not know if the floor remembers the weight of you, if water plans to be wet, if doors still choose open over shut. You will be a guest in every hour, and you will not know the etiquette. If I give it, I asked, will he live? She shrugged in the exact way my grandmother used to, full of God and honestly who knows. He will live as long as lives live when nothing interferes with them, she said, which is to say, long enough to make his own mistakes in his own voice, and perhaps to see winter be beautiful from the right window. I looked at the bread and salt in my hands, and then at my hands, and then at the old woman, and realized that bargains are just mirrors placed cleverly. Take it, I said. Baba Yaga smiled like a gate opening. Sit, she said, and when I did, she placed 2 fingers against my forehead. She didn't take it like an extraction. She invited it out the way. A nurse invites a splinter. It hurt and didn't. It felt like stepping from a train platform onto a train that had not yet decided whether it exists. It felt like learning to pronounce a word that never stays still long enough to keep its vowels. When she removed her hand, the room brightened and dimmed in the same motion. My eyes took 2 steps to find the wall. Go home, she said. Carry bread back. Feed your brother. He will be hungry after life returns to him. What do I owe? I asked, because my mother raised me to write thank you notes. You already paid, she said, and the fondness in her voice was almost cruel. Now go before the hut decides to nap. Outside, the forest was less a place and more a suggestion. The path led me and did not. The fence rotated back to show its teeth to me, which is neighborly if you think about it. The crow flew ahead and then behind, and then sat on my shoulder briefly to remind me that I now belonged equally to before and after. I made it home by remembering and forgetting at the same time. The house was a question mark when I reached it. The door felt surprised to see me. My brother lay in his bed, breathing like he was trying it for the first time. He woke at dusk, hungry as promised. He ate bread and salt and soup and the rest of a chicken he apologized to with every bite. He slept like a new road, straight, with a little curve in exactly the right place. I went to pour water and watched it hang between pitcher and glass for a long, thoughtful moment before deciding to fall. The floor and I negotiated. Stairs introduced themselves at the top and were new at the bottom. I laughed and cried, and laughed again, because anxiety is just awe wearing yesterday's hat. Days became possible in a sequence that refused to admit it was a sequence. Good, let them refuse. My brother grew, then went back to the work of living. He asked me what had happened. I told him, a hut, a fence, a woman who knew where to put her teeth. He believed me because certainty had leaked from our rooms and left space for belief. Twice a month I go back to the forest with bread and salt and a ribbon. Sometimes the path appears under me, sometimes it doesn't, and I end up sitting on a stump talking to a mushroom that looks like a chair. On the days I find her, Baba Yaga feeds me soup that tastes like remembering the name of the first person who made you laugh. We talk about crows. I bring her stories that don't end. She likes those best. Once I asked her if certainty ever grows back. She shook her head. If it did, you'd only spend it again, she said. Better to learn how to live without it. How? I asked. She gestured at the door that hadn't been there a moment ago and was now the only door in the world. Bread and salt, she said, and the grace to let water decide. At night, when the house tilts like a boat deciding which river to choose, I put my feet on the floor and thank it for its service. When the coffee hangs in the air thinking it might want to be rain, I wait and say, as you like. When my brother laughs in the next room, it sounds like a small god inventing morning. I don't know if it will continue. I don't need to. If you go to her, don't bring luck. It is a petty coin. Bring a price you can feel leaving. Bring a question that is not a command. And when she asks for something you thought wasn't a thing, say yes if you can. You might learn how to be a guest in your own life, in a way that makes every hour set a plate for you. The path won't show until you're on it. That's the trick and the blessing. Walk anyway. The forest knows your family, and if the floor forgets you, introduce yourself again kindly until it remembers your weight. Now, on to the next story. The first time I heard the song, I thought it was the wind doing what wind does in places that have been emptied of purpose. The old quarry, everyone in town called the Hollow, had been shut for decades, a bite taken out of the hill and never chewed. I camped there because I was cheap, tired, and too proud to admit the motel's flickering vacancy sign made me nervous in a different way. By day, the Hollow looked like ruin with a view. Rusted cables drooped in lazy parabolas. A shattered conveyor belt lay like a peeled road. The pit itself dropped in terraces of stone, the color of old teeth, every ledge filigreed with scrub that had no interest in my opinion. By night, the edges lost their lines. The dark poured down and held still. I ate from a can, read by headlamp, until the words turned into ants, and slept hard enough to forget there was anything to be afraid of. Sometime near midnight, I woke because a voice was humming, not close, not far, the way a refrigerator hums felt before it's heard. It threaded the air with a tune more shape than melody, like the tale of a lullaby after the words fall off. I lay very still and listened to the tent fabric do its small shivers. The hum bent upward and down, then paused on a note that tasted like cold metal. I unzipped the flap an inch. Moonlight lay on the quarry floor in pale ribs. The wind moved in careful hands. Down in the pit, fog had gathered, or there had been no fog when I went to sleep. It was not rolling or rising. It was waiting. The tune changed. It tried my name. Not a perfect pronunciation, just the outline of it, like a stranger who has read it once and risks it anyway. My skin lifted as if a temperature had dropped inside me that the air would get around to later. I closed the flap and told myself that sleep folds strange sounds into the shape of whatever you fear most. The second night, in a motel 20 miles away, the vent above the bed hummed the same melody. A woman's voice, high and even, like a mother who has rehearsed calm. When she reached the place where the note bent down, the vent breathed my name correctly. The TV volume didn't help, neither did running the sink. In the morning, I put my coffee down untouched and asked the waitress if anyone had ever complained about a noise from the hollow. She went still, in the kind of way you see around grief. "Don't go back," she said, not unkindly. I wasn't planning to. She looked at me the way my fifth-grade teacher did when I said I hadn't eaten the paste. It remembers who listens. The third night, I sat where the pit's lip turned to shale, and the wind had to decide whether to go on or circle back. Fog moved below, as if someone were stirring something heavy with a spoon too long. The song began as if it had been playing and only now decided to include me, soft, patient, expectant. When it tried my name, it didn't try. It knew. "What do you want?" I asked, because questions buy time. The fog took on the suggestion of bodies, thin as pencil lines. Dozens, maybe more. They swayed gently, like reeds that have learned sorrow. The humming multiplied, harmonies arriving and leaving with the unison of a tide. The tune was older than the quarry and younger than the rock. "Come down," said my own voice from inside the song. Not an echo, a perfect mimicry. I stood. I didn't mean to. The body answers music with movement. Gravel shifted under my boots. The descent toward the service road suddenly looked reasonable, like stairs you just hadn't seen before. I took one step because one step is how falling introduces itself. A beam of white light slashed the fog. A truck's horn startled the hill. The foreman of the road crew, who'd been regrading the county line, leaned out his window, face creased with a kind of anger that has fear woven in. "Not tonight," he called, as if he knew the schedule. I blinked. The shapes below softened back into fog. The song dropped to a hum that felt like a room clearing its throat. "Not tonight," I said back, to the pit or myself. I went home by a route my GPS didn't recognize until it did. After that, it stopped being nightly. It started being everywhere. A kettle reached a boil in my apartment and held the note too long. The elevator in my building found a frequency I hated. A woman on the train hummed under her breath, a melody that made me stand between cars for the rest of the ride. No matter where I went, the same cadence threaded the day. Up, down, hold. My name, a plea that wore politeness like clothes. I avoided sleep and then wanted it desperately. I smiled too wide while people talked. I began to look at storm drains as if they were mouths. The voice in the vent grew bolder. I taped a towel over it, and it hummed through cotton. I put my head under a shower, and it built itself from the water. I asked the town historian, because historians sometimes say the wrong thing and save your life. He used words like script and company store and accident, then shifted to softer ones: collapse, widows, unrecovered. He said the pit had a second dig in the 20s, quiet, off the books, below the level where the ledge had broken years earlier. He said they'd chased a vein past where the engineers would sign, and the tunnels got narrow, and the men got small in the dark. He said the company moved the fence and the map and a line item, and then moved away. He said no one ever heard rocks landing when they threw them in to test the depth. He lowered his voice like I might know someone who had never climbed back out. On his desk lay a ledger of names in 2 columns, shifts and Sundays. Pencil thin, some scored, some entirely erased, some smudged like someone had rubbed them and then stopped. He let me read until my eyes blurred. Beside the list, he'd written a single sentence: "What sings down there isn't grief alone." "What else?" I asked. "Hunger," he said, and then he crossed it out with one line so he could still read it. I stopped going to work. I stopped telling anyone I wasn't. Sleep slid out from under me. I found myself standing by the sink at 4 a.m., holding a glass as if I had always held it. The tune had become a presence that didn't need sound. I heard it in my molars. I felt it in my wrists. My body tuned itself to a pitch the world didn't share. The fourth night on the rim, I brought earplugs, then didn't put them in because I was honest enough to know they only stop air. The fog below had thinned into columns, like pillars in an old knife. It was quiet, too quiet, the held breath silence of a stage before the actor walks on. I said, "What happens if I do?" The song answered by adding a second voice, low and familiar. My father's from the kitchen at 2 a.m. after the funeral. He hummed when he washed the last dish. He hummed when he couldn't say my name without breaking it. He hummed the same rise and fall, not because he'd known it then, but because the hollow did now, and lent it to him retroactively, because time makes poor fences once you agree to it. Rage is a good rope. I grabbed it. "You don't get to use him," I said, and the fog pulsed as if insulted, then smoothed, then brightened faintly from within. A shape resolved near the bottom of the shaft. Small. A child, hand to mouth, shushing me. Above her, a woman swayed with a bundle in her arms that might have been water, might have been a blanket, might have been a baby. Around them, lines of men in canvas coats leaned on tools. They were still as photographs, and yet they were moving, a posture learned when a voice is near you. Want to honor. "What are you?" I asked. The answer reached my chest without touching my ears. Not one, many, not dead, not only. "Do you want me?" "We want what listens." "Why me?" "You stayed. I did. Not at the rim. I'd run. But everywhere else, in the vent, at the sink, on trains, in doorways. I had made space for the song in hours where memory should live. What happens if I go down?" The child raised both hands in a pantomime of lifting. The hummed melody found a note halfway between welcome and warning. The fog took on the suggestion of walls. The pit felt narrower. "Say I did," I said, bitter now. "Say I step, say I slip, say you sing me into a path I can't see, and I crawl on my knees so my hands can learn the turns by how the stone jogs at the seam. Say I reach you. What then?" The song softened around my name in a way that hurt. "Stay. And if I don't, we will sing from where you sleep." Thunder rolled far off, not from clouds, but from the spine of the hill. A rock loosened and fell. It took a long time to become smaller. I didn't hear it land. The road foreman found me crouched by the pit at dawn and squatted the way men do when they would like to offer you dignity. He lit a cigarette and let it burn in his hand. "My grandfather," he said, after the silence had become something you could stand on, "is just shift. Long time ago. The old men still spit when they say it." He came home with white in his hair and red in his eyes. He woke up nights and said there was a fine sound under his feet, sweeter than a fiddle, and if he could only get back to it, he would be righteous in the morning. What happened? Nothing for a while, which was the problem. He was no good at anything but being near the edge. Then one June he walked back. Folks watched him go and practiced the story of how they tried to stop him. He didn't fall. The foreman pinched ash into a small, neat pile on the gravel. "Not exactly." "What do you do when you hear it?" I asked. "Pour coffee," he said. "Walk away from anything that rhymes. Don't hum to yourself, not even happy. A song's a hook looking for a jaw." I laughed, then cried, which are the same motion with different names. "I think it likes me." "It does," he said kindly and without comfort. "It likes everyone it can make a chord from." For days I practiced forgetting. I slept with a loud fan. I left the TV on an infomercial at volume 3. I practiced speaking aloud to my plants in ways that did not sound like a tune. When the vent sighed, I put on rain sounds and refused to notice if they found a key. I walked city blocks that had corners. I stood in crowded places and let other people's noises press in. The song learned my schedule and went looking for paces I had not worn yet. It found the laundromat at 3 a.m., where machines do a kind of whale song if you let them. It found a stairwell that multiplied footsteps. It found the second stall in the bathroom at work, where a crack in the tile made a reed sound when the door closed. It is hard to unteach your ears. It is harder to take the voice in your head that says this is for you and tell it, not tonight, and then not tomorrow, and then not again until tomorrow grows a rind. The last time I went to the hollow, the air over the pit was very clear, the way air gets after a storm chooses elsewhere. No fog, no suggestion of bodies, no sound. The quiet was bigger than my name. I sat and hung my legs over the drop like an idiot at a swimming hole. I spoke in prose. I recited recipes. I said the alphabet in threes. I told the quarry the names of my teachers in order. I told it the worst and smallest things I'd done, the petty meannesses that collect like grit in the bends of a life. I did not sing. At sunset, when the sky went bruise-colored and the first bat practiced the shape of a turn, a note rose from below like a hand. It was wrong, off by a hair. I didn't look down. I stood and stepped back, and then back again. I didn't run, because running is a rhythm, and rhythms are roads. I moved to a place with traffic and bad saxophone on subways, and neighbors who play two-note doorbells. I kept my windows open so the street could fill me. I learned other sounds. I hummed nothing. I listened to talk radio, to sports, to my idiot upstairs neighbor who screams laughing at 2 in the morning. My father's voice stayed where it belongs now, on the other end of a saved voicemail I won't delete. When the kettle catches a certain pitch, I lift it off, let it cool, and set it back down sideways so it will remember to be water. Sometimes, in the middle of a crowded day, a truck backing up will hit the interval just right, and my mind will walk to the edge. Sometimes I wake and hear the vent breathe one note too long, and I put my palm flat to the wall and tell it a list of groceries until the list runs out of tune. Sometimes I hear my name from a mouth in a room I'm not in, and I say, not tonight. The hollow is a place where stone remembers a choir. It is also a habit in the body. It will be, forever, one of the ways I could end. I think of the child who raised her hands. I think of the foreman's grandfather, righteous in the morning he never reached. If you camp near a pit people call by a proper noun, be suspicious of your bargains. If a song finds you, give it a shape with a door and get out of the room. Do not go to vents. Do not test wells. Do not practice humming. When it uses your father's voice, don't answer. When it learns yours, teach it boredom. When the wind is only wind, think it aloud, badly and flat. Make your voice a dull instrument. Hang on to ugly noise. Stay where corners keep their promises. And if you ever stand at the lip of a perfectly quiet hole, and it calls you by name, say what the road crew says. Not tonight. Say it until the hill forgets you. Then go home by a way you have to count. Now, on to the next story. I didn't believe the stories about the river until I saw the lights myself. Everyone in town had a version. They said if you drove the South Road by the water at night, you'd see lanterns bobbing on the current, sometimes red, sometimes white, sometimes blue, like a torch drowned too deep. Old men said they were the souls of miners who drowned in the floods of 22, forever looking for the path home. Teenagers swore they were UFOs, swamp gas, or headlights playing tricks. The church folk shook their heads and muttered about demons that mimicked light to lure you close. I thought it was folklore, the kind towns like ours needed to keep themselves interesting, until the night I followed them. It started simple. I was restless. The cabin I rented sat 2 miles off the river, with no neighbors except raccoons that knew how to raid trash bins. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't read. The night pressed heavy, so I got in my truck and drove. The road to the river was narrow, lined with leaning oaks that made the headlights crawl like nervous fingers. At the bend where the asphalt ran close to the water, I saw it, a pale blue light hovering just above the current, bobbing gently as if tied to a boat that wasn't there. I slowed, squinting. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't the moon. It pulsed softly, like it was breathing. Then another appeared 20 yards downriver, glowing red. Then another, white closer to the bank. I pulled over, killed the engine. The night swallowed the sound, leaving only the lapping of water and the drone of insects. The lights didn't waver. Something in me said go home. But another part, the part that's broken in people like me, said find out. I climbed down the embankment, gravel crunching under my boots. The first light, the pale blue one, drifted closer. It was the size of a lantern flame, but there was no smoke, no heat. I reached out. It darted back. Not fast, not natural, like it was teasing. Hello, I said, my own voice sounding foolish. The light pulsed once, then it moved further downstream, pausing as if waiting for me. I followed. The riverbank narrowed, brush grabbing my sleeves, mud sucking at my boots. The lights formed a path now, blue, red, white, red again, like breadcrumbs scattered on black water, always just far enough to make me chase, never close enough to touch. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became. No frogs, no insects, even the river seemed to hush. My chest tightened, my breath came loud in the silence. Then I saw her. She stood in the shallows 20 feet ahead, water lapping at her calves. A woman in a gray dress that clung to her body like it had been soaked for years. Her hair hung long and black, dripping into the current. Her face was pale, almost luminous, and her eyes burned like the lantern lights. The lights hovered around her now, orbiting her head like fireflies, too disciplined to scatter. I froze. She raised her hand, beckoning. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs moved forward, one step, then another, as if her gesture carried weight. The mud sucked deeper at my boots. The water reached my knees. Come closer, she whispered. Her voice wasn't carried by the night. It was inside my skull, intimate as breath. My mouth opened without my permission. Who are you? She tilted her head. The lights brightened. One who waits, one who was left. My feet kept moving. I was chest deep now, current tugging. The light swirled faster, dizzying. Her hands stretched toward me, and then I remembered what the old men had said. The lights are bait. Don't follow them, no matter what they promise. I slammed my eyes shut, dug my nails into my palms until the sting broke the trance. When I opened them again, the lights had multiplied, dozens, maybe hundreds, bobbing on the water, surrounding me in a ring of color. The woman's face twisted, not angry, but hungry. Her mouth opened, wider and wider, until it split her face in half. The lights poured toward me, searing bright, their glow filling my eyes until I couldn't see. I threw myself backward, half swimming, half stumbling. My hands clawed at mud, branches, anything solid. Something brushed my ankle, slim fingers, cold as river stone. I kicked wildly, broke free, and scrambled up the bank on hands and knees. Behind me, the lights wailed. That's the only way I can describe it. Not sound, but pressure, a chorus of grief that pressed against my bones. Then silence. I didn't stop running until my truck was in sight. I tore the door open, fumbled the keys, and gunned the engine so hard, gravel spit from under the tires. The rearview mirror showed nothing but darkness. Back at the cabin, I bolted the door and sat shaking until dawn. I told no one who would believe me. In town, they just nod, the way people nod when they've heard another fool join the list of near misses. But I've noticed something since. Every night when the river is close, I see faint glimmers through the trees, not bright enough to mistake for lanterns, not loud enough to make me follow, just enough to remind me they're there. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear her voice, soft and patient. Not yet, but soon. Now, on to the next story. The first time I heard the station call a stop that doesn't exist, I thought I was mishearing my own voice. The graveyard shift in central control isn't glamorous. It's a room that smells like warm plastic and old coffee, half lit so the wall of monitors wears the city like a dim aquarium. I sit under a map that pulses with tiny lights, trains as fireflies, power blocks as bones. Between midnight and 5, it's mostly ballast, a few last runs rattling home, a lot of empty track, and in between the city's heartbeat, learning to keep quiet. Next stop, Marrow Street. Doors open on the left. I had just finished the 0210 slate of automated announcements. Delay on the blue, elevator out at East Market. Mind the gap if you still believe in poetry. My finger hovered over the console touchpad, the way it does when you're done with a thing, but not ready to admit it. The speakers that run our internal feed murmured with the uninteresting sounds of a station at night. Hum, draft, a distant cough. Then that, my voice saying a name I've never recorded, for a stop our map has never carried. I pulled up the list of all scheduled stations, as if software could argue with what my ears had just taken in. The list is tidy. We have the stations we have. The ghosts live in the hallways, not in the database. A camera at platform 2 of Kingfisher flickered. The platform was empty, except for a man whose jacket made him look like a plastic bag caught on a fence. He turned toward the lens with the recognition of people who know cameras better than faces. The glass behind him showed his reflection, then something else, then only the tiled black. Next stop, Marrow Street, my voice said again, softer, as if a door had been closed between us. I unmuted the ops line. The dispatcher on duty yawned so hard we both felt it. You hear that? I asked. Hear what? The room's vents answered, because vents always choose the wrong time to grow opinionated. I listened for my phantom again and got only the live feed from a blue line car, a lone pair of shoes on gray vinyl, 2 ad posters pretending to be cheerful, the driver's cab door shut and properly latched. It's nothing, I said, and the dispatcher grunted in the language of people who love nothing. Later, at 3, a maintenance crew keyed up on the radio to say they were clear of the track by the old river tunnel. Someone made a joke about eels, someone else about urban legends. Laughter sounded like wrenches politely clinking. I signed them out of the block and watched the little rectangle on my map change color, safe again. I noted the time in my log and the steady handwriting I learned after. I practiced being tidy because it gave me a way to survive what I couldn't control. At 3:17, a train icon butted at the edge of the map in a place no train should ever bud. We're not an old city, not in the European sense, but we've dug enough holes to pretend. There are tunnels we don't use. Some got flooded, some got walled off when the new line's curve didn't agree with the old. There are rooms under stations that appear on the original schematics as storage, and whose keys we don't carry anymore. There are tracks laid for promises that budgets never kept. The map in my head is 2 maps overlaid, the official one, with its colors and stops that council members can pronounce into ribbons, and the other, the one I started collecting the year my son disappeared, and no camera could say which door took him. The arriving icon bore a designator the system should never display, K0. We have no K line. Dispatch, I said evenly. What do you have near the old river tunnel? Nothing, he said, brisk now, awake in the way men get when something violates their idea of the world. Why? Glitch, I said. I dragged the cursor over the icon, and it offered me a speed, 11 miles per hour, a length, 6 cars. Power draw, wrong. It was pulling from a string of blocks we no longer fed. The system offered a route as if its feelings mattered. The route ran past 3 stations we don't staff anymore because no one lives on the river flats now, not since the 3rd flood. Past that, it made a sharp left where left is wall and climbed toward the interlocking that separates green from orange. It did not slow. It flowed like water in a basement. "Do you want me to call the cops?" Dispatch asked, and I imagined uniformed officers in a room that smells like our room, staring at a bank of screens and practicing disbelief. "Negative," I said. "Probably a logging error." I zoomed. The icon held steady, like an animal refusing to be shooed. "Technicians can look in the morning. Next stop, Hickory Gate," my voice said on the internal feed, calm as a priest. "Doors open on the right." "We have no Hickory Gate." I switched to the driver to control line. No one called in. The rolling stock cameras showed the same thing over and over. A long night to nowhere. On camera 2, a woman slept with her mouth slightly open, clutching a paper bag that had the shape of dinner. On camera 4, someone had scratched a set of initials into the wall by the second seat from the door, the way teenagers do when they believe in future archaeologists. On camera 6, an ad for a mattress clung stubbornly to a frame that had been meant to hold real plastic, not 3 layers of overlapping tape. "Call the interlocking," Dispatch said. "Tell them to go eyes on when the whatever it is reaches it." "Copy," I said. Then, because there are chores that keep terror from finding your throat, I wrote a maintenance ticket for a flickering light at beach. I set the ventilation at Haviland to circulate once an hour, because sometimes the air is the problem people can't name. I ticked time forward a minute with my fingertip and watched the K0 get nearer to a place we control. In the corner of the room, under the map and its polite pulsing, sits a shelf of things lost. Not the big lost and found. That's at Central Station. Open weekdays 10 to 4, guarded by a woman named Nisha, who remembers children by what they loved enough to misplace. This is the other lost. The things night people scoop from platforms and stairwells between trains. Because sometimes objects scare the daylight crew, and sometimes the daylight crew scares the objects. A cracked pair of glasses. A scarf that smells like wet wool, even when it's dry. A child's shoe with a Velcro strap that never quite learned to stick. A plastic ring. A toy phone. I pick things up. That's how my right hand stays busy when the left is counting minutes. The toy phone weighs almost nothing. It's meant for a toddler. Big buttons with pictures instead of numbers. A tiny speaker that chirps when you press the star. A face sticker rubbed half off. It has no battery compartment. It has never had one. Press the star and it chirps anyway. When the K0 reached the interlocking, the camera there showed what I expected and hated: nothing. Track, the red eyes of signal aspect as if it were holding its breath for an express that never runs at this hour. The wall beyond, stained in a certain way because water, like rumor, finds the same paths over and over. I toggled the light control for the next station in line. The station lights came up like a nervous laugh. The internal feed said, in my voice, "Next stop, Ashdown. Doors open on the left." Ashdown is on the map, but no train had asked permission to enter it. I pulled up the power monitor and watched the draw dip and surge like a heartbeat that doesn't understand itself. Interlocking control. A new voice crackled into my ear. "This is not funny." "Agreed," I said. "Do you have any eyes inbound?" "A camera," she said. "And Vic, who doesn't get paid enough to believe in ghosts." Dead air. Then, more softly, "It's on the board but not on the rails. Can you put it in my hands?" I knew what she meant. Sometimes the software uses old expectations to keep itself from crashing. Sometimes you can shepherd it better if you give it a place to land. "I can clear the block if no movement detected." "That's not what I asked," she said. "I know," I said. "Next stop, Marrow Street." My voice said, too calm to be true. Doors open on the left. I have a son. Had. Have. The grammar depends on the hour. He was 4 when he loved trains the way other boys love fire trucks. He pressed his palms to the windows at Central and named colors like spells. He would not sit on my lap if the bench had gum underneath, because he liked beginnings more than middles. On a Tuesday in March, the kind with rain that has forgotten what temperature is, he and his mother rode into the museum and back. On the way back, between stops, a door light tripped, and the driver held at a station not on their route. The records say that. The driver opened, closed, no incident. The cameras show nothing but a small boy's handprint, where glass is colder than air. When the train rolled into our station after, he wasn't on it anymore. We had his name on the news for 3 weeks. People messaged me with sympathy after it became clear that your name makes good paper for a month and bad paper for the rest of your life. My ex-wife moved to a city with fewer tunnels. I stayed here and learned how the map hums when it's trying to solve a problem it can't admit exists. Where would you like to receive it, I asked. The center pocket, interlocking control said. Behind the school construction. If it exists, it'll hate that. Copy, I said, and told the map the lie it wanted. This is a train. I am clearing its way. The K0 took the path politely, like a man who tips badly but holds a door. Next stop, Hickory Gate, my voice said again. It made my teeth hurt. Doors open on the right. Dispatch breathed in my ear. You're not? No. I said I'm not. Then who? I don't know, I said, and let the unknown sit between us like a sleeping dog. You refuse to step over. We're receiving 202. 202 shows your train clocking into a block. It didn't. The software does this when it can't tell you something directly, because it would break its own rules to do it. It flags, instead, the fact that time did not pass the way it thinks it should, which is the bravest thing a machine can do. Do you want me to kill power? Dispatch asked, and I imagined the city above me sighing as the neon goes thin. Hold, I said. If this was a malfunction, power cycling might bury it. If it wasn't, power cycling might invite it closer. There is a tone to these things, a little respect you learn to give stories that outlive the men who made them. On the Ashdown platform, the camera caught a blur at the far stair, a woman's coat maybe, the edge of a face, a bare knee, pale as a truth. She stopped when the station lights came up, turned as if she had been caught in her own kitchen at night. She held something small, the way a person carries a sandwich, or a kitten, or a phone. She was older than the last time I saw her. She is older than me now, in the pictures on the mantel. I closed my eyes and opened them again, because you are allowed that much magic in a room with a map. Next stop, Marrow Street. Doors open on the left. The K0 icon reached the pocket we had offered it. It paused. The camera showed only the pocket track's oil slick shine, as if someone had set a mirror face down. A breath caught in my throat in a way that did not respect my job. In the glass in front of me, the toy phone on the shelf lit, a star on plastic white, a glow with no battery to blame. I pressed it without meaning to. The chirp it made is for toddlers, a sound that exists in a world before uncertainty. The intercom fizzed, not the internal feed. The system-wide, the voice you use when you need to tell the whole city something at once and expect it to obey. I had not keyed it. Doors opening, said my voice. On the Ashdown camera, every door on a train that wasn't there folded back. Passengers don't fall for magic the way movies tell you they do. They hedge. They test with a toe, a breath, a turned shoulder. A kid with a skateboard touched the air where a door would be if there were a train. A woman pulled her purse closer to her chest, turned away, and then turned back, as if fear's hand on her shoulder had become rude. Someone laughed. Someone else said God without meaning anything ecclesiastical by it. On camera 3 in the Blue Line train, I had been watching earlier. The sleeping woman stirred. She lifted her head, blinked, cursed a soft local curse. The ad for the mattress promised less insomnia if you settled your debt to foam. The child's faces on the ad looked like they were asleep, so they could sell to mothers. Doors closing, my voice said, kind as surgery. On the Ashdown platform, a small boy, 4, 5, ran between his mother's knees, the way my son used to when he wanted to turn a no into a yes, trusting entirely the hallway a body can make. He ran into the light and did not hit anything and vanished in the specific way you want to believe. No child can. His mother screamed, not a movie scream, the sound a person makes when the train leaves, with the part of you it never had permission to take. I stood. The chair rolled backward and banged the shelf. The toy phone slid and fell and didn't hit the ground. It hung in the air for an extra full second, like it was waiting for a hand to catch it from the other side. Then it dropped, light as a candy wrapper. Kill power, I said, and dispatch swore. Power cycling a system in motion takes a checklist longer than the time you spend on it. He threw 3 breakers anyway. The hum in the room changed pitch like a hive that just remembered it was bees. Lights on 2 stations hiccuped and came back sulky. My board went dark, then warm. On the Ashdown camera, the woman fell to her knees and slapped her palms on nothing and left warmth on air the way candles leave on photographs. You can't do that, the interlocking op said in the cool tone of someone who can't afford to cry. You can't take the whole city out on a hunch. It's not a hunch, I said, and the toy phone in my hand pressed the star by itself and chirped like a heart monitor. The K0 icon vanished. The software offered a balloon of text. Ghost train cleared, then swallowed it politely, as if to apologize for its joke. The monitors returned to their aquarium, empty tracks, the occasional janitor, a rat practicing stairs. Dispatch muttered about reports and reprimands, and he would cover for me, and please don't ever ask him to do that again. In the Ashdown feed, the woman's hands lifted from the perfect air and left 2 ghostly prints fading on nothing. She turned her head toward the camera. Her mouth shaped a name I know very well. The morning managers arrived at 6, smelling of clean shirts and the kind of sleep you earn by not knowing what night is like. I filled out 3 incident reports with words that made sense, then signed them with a hand that had not had a place to rest in hours. Someone brought donuts. Someone charted the power dip against a maintenance window and shrugged. The city above us stretched, checked its phone, and pretended to have dreamed nothing. At 9, after the commute, the woman from Ashdown came into central control. Not many people even know where we are. They pass under our rooms every day and never think about who pushes the announcements and turns the air and sends steel where steel must go. She had a face I had seen younger. She had been the kind of pretty that doesn't realize it, and now was simply true, in the way a person gets when she has buried enough people to stop asking why. She carried a paper bag that had once held a sandwich, or a kitten, or a phone. She didn't look at me. She set the bag on the counter and said to no one. He was holding my hand. Then she left, and the smell of wet wool followed her out. Inside the bag lay a child's shoe with a Velcro strap that would never quite learn to stick. The city is generous with its stories if you stay late. Over the next weeks, more voices came through the internal feed when they weren't supposed to, calling stops that don't exist in my tidy database. Hickory Gate again, a station called Unthank, a place called South March, that old maps list as a marsh. K0 rolled its impossible route 3 more times, always after 3, never at the top of the hour. We learned its habits and it learned ours. When it called doors, it wasn't only for the lost. Sometimes it took fear, sometimes it gave it back. Once a man put his palms to the space where a car should be and stepped backward as if something had nudged his knees. Once a dog bristled and then lay down, obedient to a whistle we couldn't hear. I do the brave thing now when it comes. I don't fight it with breakers. not unless someone is about to give the night what it cannot return. I open the right yards so it will hate them and pass. I light the wrong platforms so it will miss. I speak into my own microphone and fill the city with useless inventory, a clock that's 3 minutes slow, the names of bridges that don't exist anymore, smells the fans can't explain, so there is less room for the other voice to coil itself into the day. I never say my son's name out loud, not in the headphones, not in this room where the map loves names. Sometimes the toy phone lights by itself, and I put my palm over it, like you do a candle you mean to smother kindly. It warms my skin and pretends not to. Next stop, Marrow Street, my voice says on nights when I have not recorded anything, and somewhere under the river where the concrete sweats and paint remembers flood, a 6-car nothing rides along a track we didn't lay, carrying everyone it's owed. The city will tell you there is no K-line. The city is technically correct. The K-line is a habit the tunnels picked up from us, the way we want everything to be a line with stops and starts. But habits are real. They make routes with or without your permission. The night has its own signage. The walls have their own way of reading maps. If you hear my voice call a station you can't find, don't follow it. If something like a door opens where no train waits, take a step back and find a human hand to hold. If you have a child with fingers like stars, put their palms on windows you trust and teach them to say the names of colors like spells, but keep a hand on their shoulder when the train says there's a shortcut. And if you have lost something that answers when the internal feed says a stop you've never ridden to, do not come to the platform alone. Bring someone who believes in inventory. Bring a person who can list what's in their pockets without looking. Keys, receipt, a coin from a country they have never seen. Bring something small that makes a noise that doesn't need a battery. Hold it in your hand. When the impossible doors open and the air exhales like a tunnel, remembering wind, press that star and make a toddler's chirp. Sometimes the night will blink, annoyed, like a driver caught at yellow who chooses red. Sometimes the doors will close on nothing, and the K0 will carry on, stubborn as a rumor, and sometimes, rarely, you will hear a small familiar laugh, like tape left on a radiator, and you will be forgiven for the way your knees go out. On my shelf under the polite pulsing map sits a paper bag and a shoe with a Velcro strap. Next to it, the toy phone, its face sticker half rubbed away by someone's thumb. When the lights in the room choose to go thin and the tunnels gather their own breath, I put my hand on the phone and feel the heat that plastic can hold if you let it, and I say into the mic, for everyone and no one, doors closing. The room waits. The city holds its map like a promise it's not sure it can keep. And somewhere below, in the pocket behind the construction that made us safe, steel rolls where steel shouldn't, and a small voice I know counts stops I've never learned, certain that if he gets to the right one I'll be there, standing in a light that doesn't exist, offering my hand through air that remembers both of us. Now, on to the next story. The phone booth had been dead for years. The glass panes were fogged with the kind of grime that only time applies, each rectangle a small gray aquarium for moths and dust. It sat on the corner by the old post office, a relic left standing out of habit, the way a town leaves a statue up when no one remembers who it is. It started ringing on a Tuesday, noon. Everyone heard it. The sound cut through traffic like a thin blade. Not loud, exactly insistent. The first ring stopped the mailman in his tracks. The second made Mrs. Kivett drop her grocery bag. Eggs broke in slow motion. By the third, the whole block had turned to look at the booth that hadn't called anyone in a decade. No one moved to answer. It's amazing how quickly adults remember being children when a dare is implied. It stopped after 7 rings. It started again at dusk. 7, again at midnight. 7. The mayor called the phone company, and a man came with a tool belt and a shrug and declared that nothing was connected to anything. The cord inside the booth wasn't plugged into the ground. The wires in the street were bones. On the second day, a teenager answered, because teenagers are who we send to speak to the future. He pushed the folding door in, grimaced at the smell, and lifted the receiver with 2 fingers, the way you lift a dead thing that still might surprise you. Hello? He listened. His face went blank, then thoughtful, then frightened in the small way you can hide if you've practiced on mirrors. Yeah, he said after a long time. I remember. He hung up and walked home like rain had started, and he didn't want anyone to see him getting wet. No one could make him say who it was. Not his mother, not his friends, not the pastor who mistook curiosity for care. He changed his route to school to avoid the corner. On the third day, the booth rang at 7 minutes past 7 in the morning. Mr. Rosario, who has not been late to the hardware store in 30 years, stepped inside and picked up. Hola, he said cautiously. He listened. He said nothing else for a very long while. Tears rolled down his face into his mustache. He laughed once, the bad kind, the kind you make when you want to be polite to a pain that is visiting. When he hung up, he placed his forehead against the glass pane as if it were a cool hand. It was my mother. He told no one and everyone. She asked where I put her red scarf. She was always losing it. His mother has been dead since I was a child. After that, answering became a ritual. Not everyone did it. Some kept a wide berth, as if the booth were a stray dog that might bite. Others waited for the ring like church bells, hoping their name was in its mouth. It always rang 7 times, and if you weren't inside by the 6th, the door would stick on the 7th in a way that felt personal. It never called the same person twice. When it rang for me, the light was doing that late afternoon trick where it turns polite. I was walking home with a bag of flour and a lemon because pie is a spell you can cast on a house to make it remember happiness. The first ring reached into my chest and plucked the string that runs from childhood to the place where I store things I mean to forgive myself for someday. The second ring made me cross the street. By the third, I was at the door. By the fourth, I was inside, smelling the booth's old breath. I lifted the receiver on the 5th and said the thing you say when you don't know who you're about to be. Hello? A pause that wasn't silence, air moving in a room I couldn't see. Hey kid, said my brother. He has been dead 5 years. The sound of his voice was a chair pushed back from a table, footsteps in a hallway you know by heart. I sat without meaning to. The booth did not have a chair. I just found myself lower, knees aching pleasantly. Where are you? I asked because grief trains you to ask useless questions. He laughed the old way, a little higher on the tail, as if gladness were something you could temper. Wrong end of the line, he said, but the line is thin tonight. I closed my eyes. The lemon in my bag pressed a small sun into my thigh. What's it like? I asked because people do. Like taking off boots you wore too long, he said. Like remembering a name took too much effort, and now you don't need names. Like walking in a house without corners. I put my head against the glass, against the town, against the day trying to be ordinary. Why the phone, I asked. The living need doors, he said gently. We don't, but we remember how to knock. We talked the way people talk in kitchens at the ends of parties, when the good plates are stacked and the last song on the playlist has been replayed 3 times because no one wants to go home. He asked about our father's stubborn knee. I asked about the dog that carried his shoe for a week after the funeral. He apologized for the last fight over nothing. I apologized for not calling back the day before the accident, as if the day before any accident were a place you could live indefinitely if you bought the right map. How long? I asked when the booth's air changed. A subtle thing like weather rearranging its furniture. 7 minutes, he said. The line learns you, and then it forgets you. That's its kindness. What do you need? I asked because love likes errands. He thought, or seemed to. Perhaps he wanted to comfort me with the shape of thinking. Hide the red scarf, he said, and laughed when I made the confused sound he must have expected. Sorry, not yours. I'm borrowing someone's ending. He shifted, and I heard the sound of a chair in a room I will never see. Live where your kindness doesn't exhaust you, he said. Stop answering numbers you don't recognize unless you want to. Lock the door to the room that hurts and open it once a year with cake. I don't bake enough, I said. You're holding flour and a lemon, he said, and I could see him grin even with my eyes shut. You're doing fine. The line thinned. I felt it in the bones of the booth. I have to go, he said, and the words didn't wound. They just were. Answer for someone else if you can, he added. Sometimes the number's wrong. The click when he left the line was small and decent. The receiver was heavier when it held no one. I stepped out into a town that looked exactly the same, and wasn't. The mailman waved. The mayor pretended this wasn't happening. A child pressed both hands to the glass and left perfect prints. The booth rang for months. The stories braided themselves through the town's days. A widow spoke to a daughter who had never lived to turn 12. A gambler refused to pick up and then ran 4 blocks on the 7th ring and found the door stuck and wept in a way that made forgiveness feel like a thing the air could do. The pastor answered once and said nothing after, which is how I knew the call was for him and not for his congregation. One night it rang, and no one was near. The sound bounced off the post office, off the closed bakery, off the statue whose name we'd forgotten. I ran because pie crust can wait, and grief has never been patient. I pulled the door, lifted the receiver, and said hello to buy time. A woman spoke, a voice I didn't know. She said a name that wasn't mine, syllables soft as a lullaby. I told her she had the wrong number. She laughed like turning a page. No, she said, just the wrong hands. And then she asked, is he there? The boy with the blue jacket and the bad haircut? I looked up. Across the square, a kid in a blue jacket hovered, halfway between leaving and staying. He'd been circling the booth for days, waiting for the ring to forgive him for not being brave. I waved him in. He frowned, wary. It's for you, I mouthed. He came, shoulders hunched against a weather that wasn't weather, and I handed him the receiver, the way you hand a bride a bouquet, and hope she remembers what hands were for. He said, Mom, and folded up like paper. After that, I started going on the hour, not because I wanted another call. My brother's 7 minutes were sufficient for a lifetime, but because the booth had become for our town a hinge. We gathered near it the way people gather near fires they pretend are incidental. We kept a list, not of who had answered, but of who shouldn't have to do it alone. Teenagers, Mr. Rosario, the woman who sells shoes but never tries them on. When the phone company finally sent a crew to remove the booth, complaints from up the chain about liability and vandalism and the threat of rust, the mayor signed the order and then pretended he hadn't. The crew came with wrenches and a truck. The first man touched the door and stepped back with tears in his eyes. The second man made a call from his cell to no one and cried too. They left the booth standing. Paperwork got lost. Rust was patient. The town was more so. It rings less now. The line, I think, has learned our names the way old songs do and doesn't need to practice as much. When it does ring, someone answers. Sometimes it's for the air and not for the hand, and we hang up gently. Sometimes it's for the wrong person, and we pass the receiver until the voice on the other end sighs, relieved, and begins. If you hear it, don't be afraid of the glass or the grime or the way your reflection looks like someone you owe. Step inside, close the little door behind you. Say hello like you mean it, because you do. Don't ask too many questions. Let the voice choose the shape of the 7 minutes. When it's time to go, you'll hear it in the line, and in your ribs, and when you hang up, go buy flour and a lemon, bake a pie for the room that hurts, lock it, and visit once a year with cake and a fork. Answer if it rings for someone else and you're the one standing nearest. We keep each other's calls when we can. That, more than anything, is what makes a town. Now, on to the next story. The first time I heard the question, it wasn't a voice. It was a red window blooming on my laptop screen, square and flat and strangely glossy, as if the color were still wet. Do you like the red room? I closed the lid without thinking. The question stayed behind my eyes the way bright lights do. I told myself it was a pop-up, a prank, some buried file that launched when a certain key combo got brushed by accident. The mind makes up simple answers when you ask it gently enough. That night, the apartment held still. I brushed my teeth with the bathroom door ajar and told myself I wasn't listening for anything. The mirror flickered. Only the cheap light, I said, and the water ran red for the briefest second before clearing. I went to bed. I slept. In the morning, the laptop woke to the lock screen as usual. No red window, no question. Work slid over the hours. I answered emails, paced my calls, pretended the stale coffee was a choice. By evening, I was almost myself again. I cued a video, let it play while I cooked something simple, and when the steam fogged the kitchen window, a square of red appeared in the glass, crisp and perfect, floating behind my reflection. Do you like the red room? The words weren't written, they were implied. The edges of the red making the letters by not being there, like a stencil on the inside of my own sight. I turned, but there was only the oven door, the clock, the sink, the window looked out on the alley. Nobody stood there. No glow from any other building painted that color across the glass. I wiped it with a towel. The square smeared, then bled, then was gone, leaving my reflection pale and thinner than it should have been, as if the red had taken weight with it when it left. I didn't tell anyone. How do you describe a question that asks itself? The third time, it arrived as a whisper in a quiet that didn't feel like mine. I had stayed late at the office to avoid the apartment, and the way the hall lights clicked too long before the bulbs caught. The building emptied. The elevators began their after-hours sighing. I was writing something I didn't care about when the screen blushed red from the center out, like a drop of dye finding the shape of water. The question typed itself in a font I don't own. Do you like the red room? My cursor blinked helplessly. The red window didn't block my work. It sat inside it, as if my document were the one trespassing. I moved the mouse and watched it stutter, sluggish, as if the air had thickened. Then, in the corner of the red, a small black dot appeared, and grew, and cleared into a camera lens. I saw myself as if from across a room. The camera on my laptop was off. The tiny green LED slept. But there I was, faintly delayed, hands hovering above the keyboard, breath shallow. Behind me the office stretched out in parallel lines, desks, chairs, tall windows that became mirrors at night. In the reflection of the farthest window, a square of red hung where no screen should be. Do you like the red room? No, I typed. I don't. The words dissolved into the red like sugar vanishing in tea. The camera view pulsed once, twice, then slowed until the image froze. My own frozen face looked back at me with a little skepticism, as if I had said the wrong thing. When the red finally receded, it did so by degrees, as if a hand were pulling it away from inside the glass. I shut down. I went home. I left the laptop on the kitchen table, like an animal asleep in the sun, and lay on the couch with every light on. The hallway bulb outside buzzed in a way that made the silence inside feel crowded. Past midnight, my phone buzzed against my hip, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail because the unknown is easier if you give it a box. The notification popped up. I pressed play, telling myself if it was a scammer, I'd be angry. Anger is a railing you can hold in the dark, static, then a small, curious voice close to the microphone in the way that means the room behind it is very large. Do you like the red room? I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Same number. I pressed decline. It rang again, again. I turned it off and set it face down. From the kitchen table, the laptop chimed the sound it makes when someone starts a video call. The lid was closed. The chime happened again and again. I stood very still and waited for my breathing to match the room. No, I said aloud, though nobody had asked. I don't like it. The apartment swallowed the word like a mouth that doesn't intend to chew. When sleep came, it did so sideways, like a car sliding into a space too small. I woke to a knock, 3 precise taps at the door, as if whoever stood there had been taught manners a very long time ago and nothing else. The peephole showed me a slice of hallway, the opposite wall, the exit sign bleeding its red into the dim. No one stood outside. Still, the air held the shape of a presence that had recently left and might be waiting only for me to stop looking. In the morning, my laptop lid had shifted a fraction, as if a careful hand had considered lifting it and stopped out of politeness. The screen woke on its own when I passed. The red window blossomed without preamble. Do you like the red room? I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe acquiescence buys time. Maybe saying yes to a question does not mean yes to the consequences. I nodded and said, very quietly, yes. This time, the red did not recede. It deepened, a color you could step into if you forgot yourself for a moment. Words scrolled up from the bottom of the square, the way credits roll, white on red, names of rooms written as if rooms could be titled like songs. The waiting room, the listening room, the room where you learn not to turn around. Each title had a small thumbnail, just a darker shade in a different corner, so that if you stood back, the whole looked like a tiled wall, 100 doors pretending to be a single one. The cursor slid without my hand. It hovered over the red room. Not a title, a destination. When it clicked, the sound it made was not electronic. It sounded like a fingernail against wood. The camera view opened again. Whatever lens looked back at me sat farther away now, as if the room had backed up and taken the walls with it. I saw myself seated at the kitchen table, the cheap overhead light making a circle on the laminate, the laptop at the circle's center, like an altar someone had built while meaning well and not understanding anything. Behind me, the hallway stood open, longer than my hallway is, lined with doors that were not mine. Red seeped from under each door in a thin ribbon and ran toward the table as if it knew the way. I turned in my chair to prove that the view was a trick. The hallway behind me was the hallway behind me, short, ordinary, the closet door slightly ajar, the coat sleeves visible like tired flags. When I turned back to the screen, the long hall remained, patient and disinterested in my corrections. A door opened somewhere I could not place, not in the apartment. I know the sound of my own doors. This sound was older. It contained the weight of paint over paint, of secrets dried into the grain. Footsteps followed, soft as someone walking barefoot over remembered carpet. They came from the screen. They moved toward me from inside the red. Who are you? I asked because no answer is the same shape twice. The footsteps stopped. A shadow formed at the edge of the camera view, very tall and very thin, as if a person had been stretched to fit a frame too narrow for anything human. When it leaned, the red brightened. I felt heat on my face as if I were close to a fire that has been burning in the same hearth since the house was younger than its foundations. The voice was close to my ear and also very far away, like something spoken down a speaking tube between floors. Do you like the red room? Yes, I said, because the truth was irrelevant and manners mattered to whatever this was, and because the word yes keeps you moving in a conversation that wants you to stop. The red unfolded. The kitchen disappeared and remained. Both. I was still at my table and also standing in a room with no corners. The walls curved in on themselves, the way an eye sees the inside of itself if it forgets to blink. The red had depth without distance. I tried to judge its size and lost count of edges. The only furniture was a chair, exactly like mine, placed at the exact distance you place a chair if you want a person to sit without asking permission. On the chair lay a small white card with black writing in a hand that understood both patience and hurry. Sit. I did. The chair was my chair. The red breathed. The card turned itself over and became a second card with a second word in the same hand. Confess. I don't have anything, I said. I'm ordinary. The red deepened. A third card appeared on the table where my laptop should have been. Confess. To what? To whom? My mouth worked. The first thing that came was something small, the kind of sin dull enough to pass the time in a stranger's ear. I don't answer calls from unknown numbers, I said, even when I know it might be someone I love. The red accepted this like a teacher taking a paper with a name spelled right, and nothing else correct. The next card was not written in the same hand. The letters were broader, unfamiliar. A different person's confession borrowed my voice. I keep a list of every time I should have said I'm sorry and didn't. The red listened. Time moved as if it were waiting. I confessed more. Nothing dramatic. Not the big things you tell when you want to be forgiven like a saint. Small things that bruise real lives. I forgot my father's birthday because I didn't want to think about the year he had. I held a friend's secret too long and let it rot. I saw a stranger crying on a bus and looked away because kindness is exhausting when you haven't eaten. Each confession warmed the room, and the warmth felt like relief until it passed a point and became something else. The red began to smell faintly of iron. I wiped my palms on my jeans, and they came away clean, and not. Red does that. It paints what it wants without proof. How long? I asked. How long do I sit? The chair behind mine scraped, not against my floor, but against a floor that echoed inside the red. A weight sat down with no body to carry it. The presence leaned forward until it nearly touched the back of my throat. When it spoke, it used my voice from a time before I learned to close doors. Do you like the red room? I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I don't know. I said yes, because there is a way to leave a conversation by staying in it, and I did not know any other way out. The room exhaled. The red thinned, then thickened again, like blood clotting and breaking and clotting. The chair across from me was no longer empty. A girl sat there, 14 maybe, hair blunt cut at her jaw, eyes too dry for the story they wanted to tell. She wore a white uniform shirt, the kind that makes 100 students into a single shape, and the collar was stained red in the neat starburst pattern you get when you try very hard to keep something from spreading and fail. She looked not at me but at the space between us, as if the red had put something there that was for her. When she spoke, it was with the careful articulation of the newly dead. I clicked it, she said, like a fool. I said yes because I thought it was a joke, and then because I thought it was a dare, and then because I thought I could win. She raised her hands. The palms were clean, the backs were not. She smiled in a way that was no longer made of habits learned in a mirror. They turned my room red, she said, but not all at once. First the corners, then the threshold, then the inside of me. I breathed too shallowly and saw small white sparks at the edges of my sight. Who turned it? She tilted her head as if I had mispronounced the only word that mattered. The room did, she said. It likes to be liked. Behind her, the red gathered itself like a muscle. A door appeared where there had not been a door, or perhaps had always been a door if you knew how to see doors that are not for you. Someone stood in the doorway, tall, long coat that had once been black if red did not exist. A hand held the door, the way a hand holds a promise it intends to keep, whether you asked for it or not. The face did not belong to any person, not because it was monstrous, but because it was perfectly polite. The sort of face that never gets noticed until it never forgets you. "Don't turn around," the girl said, and her voice sharpened for the first time. "Listen to me. Do not turn around. If you look, it likes you more." The presence behind my chair leaned closer, as if I had invited it by acknowledging it. The smell of iron strengthened. The red around the corners of the room pulsed in time with my heart, and my heart began to listen to it the way a foot falls into step with a drum on a road. "Some rooms are hungry," the girl said. "They eat with their eyes." How do I leave? My voice was very small and very far away. The red blurred its edges and then brought them back, impatient. "You don't," she said, and then she smiled in the way the living smile when a joke lands exactly between them. "You pretend you already did, and sometimes the room is distracted by someone else pretending harder." She stood. I had not seen her stand, and yet she was standing. The door behind her opened wider, and the tall figure in the coat did not move, which is still a way of moving in rooms like this. She placed her palm on the table between us. It left no mark, and also left one that would be there if I thought about it too long. "Confess the biggest small thing," she said. "Not the worst, the truest. Give the room a shape of you that it can keep while you carry the rest." I closed my eyes. The presence behind me tilted its head. I felt it without any sense that calls itself by name. When I spoke, it was not a decision. It was gravity. "I hurt someone who loved me because I wanted proof they would stay," I said, "and when they stayed, I was angry because the proof was ugly." The red stilled. The chair behind me leaned away. The girl nodded in a way that contained the space between pity and respect. "Now say you like it," she said softly. "Say it like you mean it enough for it to be bored of you. Some courtesies are camouflage." I kept my eyes closed. "I like the red room," I said, and found to my horror and my safety that I meant it while I said it. "I like the red room." The door closed without sound. The air cooled. The red peeled itself off the walls of my apartment and folded into the screen, and then into the corner of the screen, and then into a single pixel that went dark and left nothing behind but its afterimage. I was alone at my kitchen table. My laptop showed my work document, half finished, blank where the red had been. My phone lay face down and polite. In the hallway, the closet door had shut itself to an appropriate angle. The next night, the mirror didn't flicker. The water ran clear. The window glass reflected only my face and the square of night behind it. But sometimes, when the apartment is very quiet and my breathing forgets to be loud, a red glow gathers in the far corner, small as a pulse, patient as a waiting room. If I turn my head too quickly, it goes away. If I don't turn at all, it becomes a question that asks itself, "Do you like the red room?" I say yes now in my head before it speaks. I say yes because that is the price of not turning around. Because some rooms are doorways, and some doorways are mouths, and some mouths are kind. If you feed them table scraps you never meant to eat. On good nights the red stays a dot. On bad ones it becomes a square, and the square becomes a window, and I sit very still and confess small true things until the room is too full of me to notice. I have not given it all. And I don't turn. I do not turn. I let the politeness behind me lean, and never learn the back of my eyes. And in the morning, when the light is ordinary again, I brush my teeth with the door open and count the corners of my rooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, and try not to think about the fifth one that waits when the lamps are off. Do I like the red room? I like it enough to be alive. Now, on to the next story. There's a church on the hill with a saint who watches the town sleep. People say she's older than the church and younger than the hill. The hill came with the land, the church came with a donation, and the saint came with a story. They set her in a niche above the side door decades ago, plaster over wood, paint tempered by a steady hand, a robe the blue of laundry sitting in a basin, a mouth small and determined, and the first thing she did was look like someone you knew. Her glass eyes had a film over them when I was a kid, which made adults talk lower in her shadow. At dusk, she seemed to see more of you. At midnight, if you went close and everyone does once, you could make out what was trapped under the gloss. Tiny irregularities, bubbles like seeds, the old way of making eyes fixed on a single forever gaze. My grandmother kept a key to the sacristy and sometimes brought me along to fill candles on Friday afternoons. It smelled of cold stone, and wax behaved better there. I loved the small hush behind the side door that felt like an apology for the big hush in the knife. One late winter day, the kind of afternoon that looks like it wants to be snow and can't quite, my grandmother kept the door propped while she hauled a box in, and in the exact moment the door was neither open nor shut, I watched the saint blink. Just once, a small correction, like dust had landed and the eye had taken care of it. Gran, I said. Hmm? She was counting votives the way saints count promises, seat of the pants and exact. She blinked. She does, sometimes, my grandmother said, and when I stared, she added gently, "You'll learn not to check on purpose." I tried not to. It's hard for a child not to. Years later, after my grandmother, after time had made the niche need repainting, after the church's roof had forgotten its job and then relearned it, after I had moved away and come back and moved away again and then came back for good, because towns do that to you. The saint's eyes were clearer. The glass had been cleaned by a restorer the parish had splurged for. The bubble glass was gone. New eyes, the kind that shine. It was only practical, Father Marco said when people complained that the new eyes made them nervous. Condensation gets behind the glaze. Mold. You want the Blessed Virgin with mold in her skull? She's not the Virgin, Mrs. Ansell said. She's Saint Dymphna, or Dorothea, or someone from the list we don't read. She knows our business. She doesn't need shine. Shine or not, she kept watch. The town had more cameras than saints now, but the saints saw the right things. She missed the loud fights and caught the quiet ones. She missed the tourist's photo and caught the 3 seconds after, when the tourist turned his phone away and looked at the hill like the hill had said his name. She missed the day we raised money for a new roof and caught the night a woman came to sit on the steps with a bag she did not open for a long time. I started sitting with the saint myself the year my father forgot how doors work. I'd walk him after supper because appetite gets tired before legs do. When your mind misfiles your maps, we'd circle the block, go by the church, nod to the side door, check that the heavy key in my pocket existed, and say neutral things about weather and the dog 2 streets over that barks like a trumpet. He didn't like the knife. The big air made him look for exits he couldn't name. But he liked the side door. The saint was at face level if you stood on the last step. She's your height, he said once, and I, who had never liked being told I was short, found that I didn't mind from him, because the way he said it meant close enough to hear you. On a Wednesday that had nothing specific wrong with it, he pulled his hand from mine and reached toward her the way a man reaches to check if the iron is still hot. The saint didn't blink. That would have been too much like another kind of story. She did something smaller. She turned her head a fraction. The glass caught dusk, then didn't. Careful, I said, but I wasn't talking to him. I just wanted to see what color, he said, hungry for words that day. Are they brown or green? Blue, I said, and then realized I was wrong. No, they're the kind that change. He looked up at her the way a child looks at a shelf and decides to climb. She knows, he said, satisfied, and I wished not for the first time that religion were as simple as the sentences we put in our own mouths. That night I woke at 3:12, and heard, no, felt the shift in the house that says a parent's feet have found an inappropriate route. I checked his room, empty. The front door hadn't been locked because he hated the idea of locked anything. I found him on the church steps, with his coat misbuttoned and his breath in the air like a small, honest cloud. The saint's eyes shone. The town lay below, lights like coins thrown into a fountain too full. What did she say? I asked, hushing myself, because asking is good and answering breaks something. She asked if I remembered the tune, he said, then laughed, then touched his head, then said, "It's a walk, isn't it?" It is. We walked home very slowly, so the tune would not get ahead of us. After he died, the saint was easier to look at. Grief can make you love statues, because they don't change except when they do. I brought candles to the side door and lit one in the little rack where the safe licks at quarters. I said, "For my father," in a voice that did not ask for a miracle. A miracle is a shortcut, and a house like ours needed a road. She looked past me. Of course she did. Saints look at the thing you didn't bring. I began to see other people standing on the steps with the same hungry look. A woman with a split lip, careful, fresh, holding a phone like it might bite. A man who wore a jacket that said another town and eyes that said this one. A kid with a backpack too light for homework, too heavy for running away. People came and told the saint their secrets without saying anything. That's the correct way to do it. When the rumor went around that the saint had been seen weeping at the side door, proper miracle whispered at markets. I shook my head. We are greedy for tears. The story arrived with details, witnesses, tissues waved like surrender flags, and still I said no. If she wept, it would not be public. It would not make anyone's faith bigger than their town. Still, I began to carry a handkerchief folded in my coat pocket, the good linen one, because my grandmother would have done it that way, and if the saint needed a plain square of clean white to choose, I could pretend that was something I could offer. One evening after the early Mass, when the light in the nave remembers how to be gold, Father Marco asked if I could help carry boxes to the sacristy. He is older now, ladders, and he don't rhyme. We stood in that small hush where wax behaves and unwrapped a new set of beeswax pillars the bishop had sent because he felt guilt about something distant and expensive. "Do you think she blinks?" Father asked, not looking at me. "I know she does," I said. "I saw her as a child, and once again when my father was halfway out of the world." He nodded. "She's not Dymphna," he said, apropos of nothing except his own wrestling. The diocesan archivist found the original note from the donor. It says St. Lucia. "Eyes," I said, feeling slow and chastened. "Of course, she carries them on a plate, if you remember your gory holy cards," he said wryly. "She leaves the better ones where they're needed." We stood a moment. "Do you think that's why she watches the town?" I asked. "To take and give?" "Everyone's always taking and giving with saints," he said, kind and tired. "Perhaps she just watches, so that someone is watching." There was a sound from the side door. Not the hinges, the quiet shifting of someone who has made a decision at last. Father and I glanced at each other and did not move, because the right kindness is to let some decisions be witnessed without help. Footsteps came and went. The door breathed and settled. The saint kept her eyes on the hill. It was the handkerchief that did it, in the end. A week later, wind sharp enough to strip paint from breath, I found a scrap of white cloth folded precisely on the bottom step, not damp though the stone was wet around it. My hand knew it before my head did, not mine. The linen was older and finer. The stitches on the edges were hands' work, not machines. In the center, the cloth bulged a little, as if it held a coin. I unfolded it, stupid, reverent. A small glass bead rolled into my palm, rounder than the saint's eyes, mottled with tiny bubbles like seeds in jam. I looked up. She watched. "It isn't an eye," I told myself aloud, because language keeps doors between things. It wasn't, not anatomically, but I knew what it meant when it was mine for a moment. Someone had come in the night with a need, and the saint had made a trade in symbols. Here is vision, leave me your fear. Here is clarity, leave me your lie. Here is the ability to look and not forget. Leave me the part of you that wants to. I wrapped the bead back in the linen and tucked it into the niche below her hands, where small offerings rest. The note folded like an airplane, the ring left like a relief, the dried bouquet that sticks around out of loyalty. Find who it's for, I said, ridiculous, and walked home with my hands in my pockets so I wouldn't touch my eyes by accident. News ran through town, not as gossip, but as startled gratitude. A girl who had fallen had the courage to say she had. A man who had been caught in his lie told it himself and then told it again until it felt like a story he was done with. A neighbor who'd gone quiet after the hospital returned with jokes only one person laughed at, and that was enough. No one said the saint did it. The saint keeps watch. People do things. One night late, I woke to the feeling that someone was standing at the bottom of my bed. It was the old fear. I am not immune. I lay there and named furniture until the feeling passed. In the morning, on my kitchen table, lay my grandmother's handkerchief, the one I carry, not the saint's, folded precisely, a small bulge at its center. No, I said to the air, smiling and not. I don't need to see more. I need to look longer. I unfolded it anyway. In the center lay nothing. The bulge was made by a fold I had not unmade in years. The cloth smelled faintly of stone. At dusk, I took my empty handkerchief to the side door and tucked it into the niche. The saint's eyes shone the way clear glass shines. She looked at the hill. The town breathed. The bell's electric now, a recorded chime, told the hour once and no one minded. If you come by the church, ours or yours, don't look for tears. Look for the small corrections, the blink that knocks dust off a gaze, the fraction of a head turn that says, I see the thing you didn't bring. Bring a clean square of cloth anyway. Bring a promise to look longer and not louder. Bring a secret and the ability to keep it until keeping hurts. Saints are doors we set in walls because we forget how to open sky. Sometimes they hand us a key that isn't a key, and we pretend to understand because pretending keeps our feet where the stone is good. If she looks at you, don't ask for anything first. Say what my father said, happy as a child. It's a walk, isn't it? And then take one around the block and around again until the hill and the town and the glass-eyed saint all agree that tonight at least you have been seen.